level. So let me hear you say, sa, netta, netta, sa, netta, netta, sa, netta, netta. All right then, sa, netta brings the truth. Black News 102. This is here for me and you. It's Black News 102. House of Consciousness, make sure you're logged into YouTube. Black man, hold your head up high, and black woman, you too. Me nah go apologize, love off me melanin. Forget them other guys, that's what I'm telling them. Salute the general, never fear the challenge. The God saw, never stay strapped with the cannon. Don't ever disrespect, so it's best you pay homage. You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. White supremacy, education, get abolished. A laptop, a pen, and my pad is my college. Black man cipher, enter at your own risk. Make Europeans bow down on 125th. Saw Netta got the spirit of Nat Turner. Waking up our people that's been miseducated and mass murdered. And it don't matter if you're shot in the clap burners. It's never too late to awake and progress further. As sure as the sun shines and the wind blows, there's therapy for post-traumatic slavery syndrome. Sanetta brings the truth. Black News 102. This is here for me and you. It's Black News 102. House of Consciousness, make sure you're logged into YouTube. Black man, hold your head up high, and black woman, you too.
Okay, can everybody hear me all right? Peace. I'm not going to come on until I promo this debate. Everyone can hear me. Put a 1 in the chat. Can you hear me, brother Ebionite Essene? You can hear me, right?
You. Yeah,
awesome.
I can hear you.
Awesome. So everybody, peace, assalamu alaikum, hotep, namaste, jambo, shalom, shalom. All the greetings of love and light to the darkest minds of the light, to the people, to the audience. Thank you for tuning in. HOK, Toughest Environment to Be In, presents tomorrow the face-off Clash of the Titans. Is Christianity crafted out of Kemetic myth? Tomorrow, December 23rd. Do not miss this. It's at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time sharp. If you did not get your ticket already, mods, beloved mods, please drop the link in the comments of the chat. So, all right, let me go ahead and take that down. We can get to the topic of the video, of the stream. Just a moment. Okay, this is live. I repeat, this is live. Hi there. How are you, brother? Peace, shalom, shalom.
Peace, shalom. Peace, shalom to the family. Peace and blessings to everybody in attendance and watching. How is everybody? How's everyone? In this, I would like to say, so-called Great Awakening of information, studies, knowledge, spirituality, and things like that. So my name that I go by is Ebionite, Essene, Nazarite, Yirmiyahu, because I do trust and believe in the teachings of the Ebionites. I used to have a formerly very Christian dogma from that theological standpoint. Through these studies over the years, I've reformed it, and I've been more acute with these studies. Essene, basically, I agree with the Essenes of the Jessean tribe. Very distinct asceticism. Nazarite, I let my hair grow. I do believe in looking at myself as a protector and guard of the Torah. I don't eat flesh. Things like that. I don't go near dead bodies, funerals and stuff like that. I don't drink wine or smoke. Stuff like that. See, here we go. Where's my beard? See, this is a problem.
There it is. Okay,
anyway,
so this brother is 100. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving people a little bit of your background. This brother lived. He lives the life. He's very proud of his beard. So shout out to the Nazarenes, to the Nazarites who don't bring a blade to their head. I wanted to bring you in, and I'm so glad you on short notice decided to come in and teach.
Captain Tazariak, excuse me, I'm not trying to be rude. Thank you I apologize. Captain Tazariak said something about bad echo.
Oh, is there an echo? Okay, thank you, Captain Tazariak.
Sorry about that.
Let me see if it's echo. Go ahead and
okay. I did hear an echo a little while back. I don't know if it has to do with my volume, so maybe I could try turning my volume down a little bit. Maybe that'll help it out a little something. And we'll just play it as we go. So my apologies for that. I just wanted to get on what he was saying so that way your podcast and presentation could be effectively received by those listening. He says it's clear.
Oh, good. And you know what I think it was? I did echo cancellation, but it may be if you are on a Samsung. Are you on your phone?
Laptop.
Oh, okay.
So I just turned the volume down. I turned the volume down on my laptop. Okay.
Perfect. Now, this brother is 100% a teacher. He's been teaching for many years. I actually learned from him. You know, I don't have any problem letting people know who I learned from. This is one of the brothers. All the information last night that I was giving, I learned it from this brother. This is now, I don't know. Do you still consider yourself a Hebrew, or because I know you gave us
I consider myself a Hebrew, a descendant, of the patriarchs, Eber, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and things like that. But I'm over here unorthodox. Like, we're not really a part of the mainstream, and I thank you for that. I consider myself a sharer and a humble servant. But also I still learn, and I learn a lot from interacting with and learning from other brothers. I would not have the information that I've had if I didn't learn to listen first and stop talking when people are sharing things that have more depth than me. And I would encourage others to do the same as we go, because this could be considered very delicate information to people who are new to what I like to call cognitive dissonance, something that might appear contradictory to their mainstream foundation of beliefs. And so this is going to be somewhat, this is my disclaimer, this is going to be somewhat upsetting to people who have a theological standpoint of Christianity. What has happened is, excuse me, and I refer to myself more of a historian. I'm more of a historian. It is echoing a little bit, but I refer to myself more of a historian.
No, keep going. I think it might be when we're both on, so I'm going to mute out. Keep talking.
Okay, thank you. I refer to myself more of a historian because I do love studying the history, and we're gonna share some of the historical aspect of the main, contrary to the mainstream, that I've learned over the years. So I refer to myself more of an historian, a sharer. I'm a humble servant, and I'm here to share with you guys what it is I've learned. So I want to be clear. I'm not trying to superimpose telling people what to believe. You got to just follow this. I'm the this and that. That's not what it is. What we're doing is we're showing the in-depth history behind aspects of the early first century that has been washed out by Rome, Europe, and the West. That goes more into detail. That gives us more clarity to make better decisions on what we consider to be authoritative. Unfortunately, what has happened is there were 7 sects among the Jews or the Judeans back then, right?
Wait, no, you are on fire already. I got to stop you for a second. You get ready to dive in. Hold on, brother. Hold that thought. Thank you. I do want to let everybody know, hit the like, of course, but that's not why I stopped this brother in the midst of his speech. I wanted to make it clear for the brothers and sisters. Shout out to our brother, Captain Tazariak. He's a very dear friend of my husband's. And let me say this. This brother has come to the conclusion about how he feels about Paul. However, the information that he shows is not his feelings. I have looked at his information and learned from his information, which is not about his feelings. And I have come to a conclusion about how I feel about Paul. What I'm saying is the writings of Paul, for me, I know not you, are valuable. But that's a different topic. We're talking about the gospel, and we're talking about the teachings of the Messiah And this is where the brother's approach is from. Why am I saying this? Because there are brothers and sisters out there who, you know, they subscribe to the epistles. They believe Paul is an apostle. But if you don't, for us to examine this, it doesn't mean that you're going against the Most High, and it doesn't mean you're going against the Messiah. So I just want to make that clear before we get started. The brother did give a disclaimer, but I wanted to add to that disclaimer and say, for you to examine this, and however you come out of this and say, okay, after seeing all this information, I don't really like Paul, or I do like Paul, that doesn't affect at all your relationship. It shouldn't, with the Messiah and with the Most High God. So we're on the same page. I just wanted to say that to the people so they can relax. They don't have to be like, oh, Paul, I don't want to hear this. My cognitive dissonance. And also I'm against God. You're not going against God by examining Paul's apostleship and what happened. What actually, and I'm going to hand it over to you, brother. Am I right? You actually are doing you're doing what the Messiah said to do. He said, examine every prophet. I'm paraphrasing, especially those who seem to be in contradiction to those who the Most High told the Messiah to designate as apostles: James,
Correct.
Paul, John.
Correct.
So go ahead. Now you can go into what you're doing.
Correct. No. Thank you. No worries. Thank you for that, and I mean that sincerely. Historically, or I can say biblically and religiously, us as a people under the European conquest of Rome and the Roman Catholic Church, I have to word it like that. They're the ones who won the war, so to speak. They're the ones, like many people know in the audience, they're the ones who dictate to the world the so-called religious foundations, such as the tenets, Catholicism, such as the Eucharist, the blood atoning sacrifice of Jesus, the letters of Paul, and what we call soteriology. Somebody says echoes back, but we'll keep going. But soteriology deals with how one looks at the method and mode of salvation, right? What we don't understand is on the mainstream religious ideology is that Rome, a lot of Rome's ideology comes from the letters of Paul. And what they don't want us to know is that there were other secularist beliefs that were very much around that time in the early first century. He needs to click echo cancellation. I don't know how to click echo cancellation. Hold on, let me see. How do I click? Okay, let me see.
I just went in and did it for you. I adjusted your I don't know about now. Maybe
I see it. I'm gonna try it. It says echo cancellation, stereo audio. Echo cancellation must be off to use stereo audio. I don't know how to do that. Oh, it is clicked. Echo cancellation is clicked.
I clicked it for you.
So I'm not sure what.
So put a 1 in the chat if we are still echoing. Are we still echoing? Just say yes or no. Are we still echoing? Because we don't. It could be a little irritating if it goes through the whole. I don't want to ruin the presentation or hinder it. I should say, not ruin it.
Okay.
So are we echoing now? I'm gonna see anybody. Can you see the chat? I'm not looking at the chat. Are we echoing? Family. I'm going.
Some say no. Some say yes. I have my volume down at 64. But I do hear an echo. Why
don't you do this for us, please? Go out, click leave, and then come back.
You got it.
All right, thank you. Not me. Okay, it's him. Thank you, Captain. Okay, so he's going to go out and come back. But while we wait for the brother, this blur is not working. That's the blur background, but it's all over me. I want to show the family a quick clip since we're waiting for him to come back. We're just going to go to that stream last night that Sonnetter did with on Sonnetter Studios with Vocab, and this isn't about personal. We're examining the information that Vocab brought forward, and I really wanted the brother to join last night, but he had an engagement with another with his other Hebrew some Hebrew brothers that he couldn't make it here. He had to go on their podcast. So let me play this and let you hear what happened last night. Let me see where
this incorrectly.
Okay, go ahead. Let me see here. I think this
can
is
get into, but it doesn't actually say the name. It says enemy. So continuing on, there's a
Follow me
challenge
to-
here. The name Simon appears 257. It's not exactly sure how soon or exactly when or where. There's some question there, but he didn't meet with them because Nepal. He even.
Okay, let me see here. I heard him come back in. Let me check. All right. While you were out, I went ahead and queued up. Well, I didn't even have it queued up. Let's hear you talk.
Oh, okay. I don't know the brother vocab. I've just heard some snippets and things like that. So anyway, so historically, we have to go.
Brother, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm just checking with I'm sorry. Ahead. We're checking to see if we're echoing. Remember, we're going to check. Oh, okay. You're still echoing. Okay. Well,
let
me see if you echo when I mute.
If you mute your mic, will it keep echoing? If we do that, and then if we'll go from there. Okay. Now I don't hear it. So let's keep going. And I thank you for that, Sister Napa.
So I'm gonna mute when you talk.
Okay, and then I'll do it likewise. And then when you talk, I'll mute mine too, to make sure that we don't overlap.
No, I know you were. I'm sorry you were going into your speech. This is the video from last night. I'm just letting you know. Let me know when I can play some of it, but go ahead and start talking.
Okay. Thank you for that. And no worries. I don't know who Vocab is. I don't know about, this person's belief and stance. All I'm here to do is share the information about it, and whatever stance Vocab and however anyone chooses to look at it, that's perfectly their free will. My job is just to share what I believe is more in-depth history of the aspect of the early first century. Now, I was saying before, most of the religious propaganda has been imposed upon us by Rome, the Catholic Church, and the West, which has erected the letters of Paul. And the letters of Paul has seemed to, if you look, taken over what we call the New Testament, right? Paul has like 13, 14 letters. Even the Greek Gospels, their letters are like 3 or 4. And I want to say there's only like 1, 2 Peter, 1, 2, 3 John, stuff like that. What about the other like 9 or 10 apostles? Why don't we see some of their letters? What happened with that? Did they just go off the scene? So historically, something has happened in regards to what we consider to be the religious propaganda. Now, I was saying this before, and I could even share my screen if and when it comes to that, is that basically in the early first century, there were 7 sects of Judaism, or what we call the religious systems of that day. And I'll do my best to share the screen to give you guys an understanding of that. Most of what we are getting today in the mainstream is Pauline. We may not understand that there were different religious secularist groups back then that, that varied greatly on their belief systems, right? On how they saw the law. Let me see if I could I'll go into Epiphanius. Epiphanius goes into the 7 sects of Judaism, right? And I don't know what happened to that page, but I'm going to try to get it back. I'll try to get it back. Let me see. I'll just go back to Epiphanius. Epiphanius, and then we could do it a couple ways. We could go into the Ebionites first, but I wanted to touch on some of the historical setting of it. So I'll go there first.
Okay, so right? What are you doing right now? I'm just gonna. There's no echo right now.
I want to share my screen to show people that Epiphanius, that goes back to I think the 3rd century, had acknowledged. Let me know if you see the screen, that there were 7 sects of Judaism in up into the 3rd century that continued on from the early 1st century. Right. So what I'm trying to say is the letters of Paul represent a specific sect because Paul was a Pharisee. So what I'm saying is, but we haven't learned the history religiously about the other 6. That's why I say when people hold the position of Paul's letters, they may not understand they're holding a Pharisaic ideology, but the other 6 would disagree. Like, for example, now this is Epiphanius. He is I want to say a historian of the 3rd century, and had a lot to do with some of the continuation of the writings. He was a heresiologist, which means he disagreed with some aspects of the religions that predated him, but he still acknowledged their existence of them even up into his day. So with the 7 sects of Judaism, the first one was the Sadducees, right? So many people may not know how the Sadducees saw the law back then, right? Because, you know, remember, they didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. I'm just jumping. I got to go fast. So I just want to be clear. All right. The second one was the scribes, right? How the scribes view the law in the early 1st century, right? And then we're going to go to the Pharisees, which is what Paul had acknowledged that he came from. I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees, a son of a Pharisee. So this is his sect on how he viewed the law, right? Again, we're talking the early 1st century, okay? All right. What was that? That was 3. So the 4th was the Hemorrhoid Baptists. Now, the Hemorrhoid Baptists, we would say, would somewhat go under John the Baptist. Hemorrhoid meaning like water, you know, baptism, bathing, purity, things like that. I would say that they somewhat remind me of the Rechabites, also in similar narrative. This is historical information that we don't have, but most of what we have is Pauline. I believe the 5th or the 6th is the Nazarenes, right? The way that they view the law varies from different secularist foundational backgrounds, right? The Nazarenes, right? And then right here, it says sect 6, the Osanes, basically the Essenes, which means Osei HaTorah, doers of the law. These were of the Jessean tribe, basically. These were only Judeans that could be allowed into the Essene sect, basically, that was known to be around the Dead Sea, Pella, and things like that, and how they viewed the law and why certain groups did not accept the letters of Paul and things like that, because they varied greatly on their belief systems. And I believe the 7th was the Herodians, right? Which, of course, we know. I don't even like to say Herod the Great. I don't see nothing great about him. He was more of a tyrant, a bully, and a psychopath and a narcissist than anything great. But the West and Rome has erected him as the great, you know, like they do with Alexander the Great and stuff like that, and against the Herodians, right? So you see right there, historically, what I'm saying is we've only received the mainstream aspect of Pauline, which is from a Pharisaic ideology, even though later they say, oh, he's of the sect of the Nazarenes. So, and I'll stop sharing my screen, but I wanted to prove that, basically, that, let me see, where am I to get back to where we are? Okay, so I wanted to prove that to show that people don't have to accept the history if they don't want to, but these are the facts, that what we've been receiving mainstream has been the letters of Paul, which is a Pharisaic ideology. Like I said, most people don't know about how the scribes saw the law, how the Sadducees saw the law, how the Herodians, or we call the Osanes, right, or the Nazarenes, they varied greatly on their ordination and their religious beliefs. So when we have these discussions, see, like, for example, he'll say Paul was a Benjamite. Well, that's what I'm saying. These discussions go very, very deep into the early 1st century.
Can you expound on that, because that is a common, and it is written in some of the epistles.
Paul is a Benjamite?
Yes. How do we work that out?
Okay. Now, according to I want to say it was even in Epiphanius. Epiphanius had said that the Ebionites said that he was actually a Tarsian. He was a Roman, or I can show that as well. Let me see. They said that the Ebionites said that he was of a Greek parentage, and they did not accept his letters. And so he claims Benjamite, but Benjamite was often termed that by someone whose heritage could not be determined. They were thrown over here in the term of Benjamite. He calls himself a Benjamite on one occasion. Another occasion, he calls himself a Judean.
Yes, I remember that.
If you go look at him, he says, I'm a Jew. Well, right. Jew just doesn't mean religion. It means Judean.
Of the tribe of Judah.
Look at it. So he calls himself a Benjamite. He calls himself a Judean. Then in certain aspects in the book of Acts, he says, I'm a Roman. So it's like we have to deal with.
I don't mean to, because there's things we're talking about. You're like an encyclopedia of information on Paul. Talk more. Can you stick on that point about Roman, because that's the discussion that's covering our community right now.
All right. So and so again, like I said, we're receiving it. Most of the information we're getting is from Paul. How about, why don't we try to get the information from somebody that's not Paul? that was around back then to get a more fully enveloped story than Paul, right? Paul calls himself an apostle, things like that. He's the one who had the fire, the juice, so to speak. But when you go and listen and read other historians back then, they're going to kind of give a little more clarity to what was going on with Paul. So let me see if I can share this out. Let me see. We could go to what, page 144. Now the Ebionites say that he basically talking about Paul was actually a Roman, and that he wanted to go marry a Levite, right? I'll show you guys what I mean. Right, this is according to Epiphanius in his day, that Paul they're saying was actually a, what did I say, 144? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. All right, again, this is Epiphanius, and anything that anybody wants to see, I'll do my best to share. Okay, how do I do it? How do I share my screen? Let me see.
You just it'll say if you click on
present. Okay, I see it. Okay, I
Yes.
just lost track of myself. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So now we go to it, okay? We go to it. All right, sharing my screen. Where are we? Okay. So this would be in the Ebionites. This would be 30, 16, and 8, right? So well, we can do 13 and 6, where they acknowledge there was a book out back then called the Essene of James, right? This kind of goes into the aspect of the Ebionites. The Essene of James is a very Ebionite book that was in existence in the early 1st century. So right here, the reason why Epiphanius is good to go to is because he's a heresiologist, which means he disagrees in certain aspects of these religious groups or their spirituality, but he acknowledges certain books and certain belief systems, even though he'll disagree with them. So I want to be clear. So when you look at, this would be 30, 16, and 6. If anybody wants to write that out, Epiphanius 30, 16, and 6. It reads, they speak of other acts of the apostles. This is called the Ebionites. This is specifically where he's criticizing the Ebionites, like he's disagreeing with their content. But little people do know the Ebionites are actually the apostles in party, and we can prove that later. This is the part that people have a hard time connecting. The Ebionites are actually the apostles, the party, and their families, all the way up into the 3rd and 4th century. But we'll keep going. They speak of other acts of the apostles.
I was muted. I got to jump in.
Go
so
ahead.
You're telling us that the Ebionites are relatives, blood relatives of the actual apostles of Christ, of Jesus,
and starting most likely, I would say between the 40s. Some say dated to the 60s CE, dealing with James, dealing with John, dealing with Peter, those in authority. And we can show proof that Paul acknowledges where he says to remember the poor. He says that in Galatians. Remember, they were speaking Hebrew, so he was talking about Ebion. That's what I'm saying. We could go into that later.
Yes, but I needed to point that out. Go ahead.
That he knew who the Ebionites were in the early 1st century and on. But anyway, so here we're in the Ebionites. So somebody could type out Epiphanius, Panarion, or medicine chest. If not, I'll do it. 30, 16, and 6. Okay. Let me see if I can do it this way. If not, I'll do it. Okay. Epiphanius.
You want to type in the chat?
Yeah, I'll do it. So that way people could, if they want to get a reference, right? They can look at it themselves.
I'll do it for you. Epiphanius. I wrote it.
Panarion. It'll say Panarion or medicine chest, right?
Epiphanius.
Or medicine chest. But I challenge this guy to a debate. See, here we go. See, I don't do debates, fam. I leave that to the other cats. I'm just sharing information.
Yeah, he's not a debater, but
I don't debate. I just share it, and people
Vocab. Vocab is in the chat.
He has the right to disagree with it, and that's fine. But I'm just sharing the information. Epiphanius, Panarion, or medicine chest. We're gonna go 30. We're gonna go 16. Okay. 30, 16. Yeah, I'm not about debates. I'm not about debates. Okay, 30, 16, and 6.
But would you sit down and have a discussion with him if it's monitored, if it's like moderated, just like a show?
I don't know.
He really, I get it. You're turned off by the whole.
To the side, and I just wanted to share it. That's it. This other stuff that
How about we do this? How about we do this, Yirmiyahu? He can look at your information and reply to it and critique it, and then you can do the same what we're going to do today. you know, you
I'm
don't have
not
to.
sure. We could talk about it later. I'm not sure. I just
But
want to
you
get
know
this
what,
out.
though? Just go ahead. We're gonna
Yeah,
show
I
you.
don't want to. Yeah, I
Vocab,
appreciate
you
it.
might
But
learn something from him, because this is the brother who I actually got my information from over the years about the Ebionites and Clementine homilies and such. So go on, not to interrupt your
okay,
flow.
so right here in Epiphanius, Panarian and Medicine Chest, if anyone wants to pull up a PDF, he's disagreeing with the Ebionites, basically, the apostles and party. They speak of other acts of the apostles in which there is much thoroughly impious material. Remember, he's disagreeing with them. And from them arm themselves against the deadly earnest. They lay down certain assents and instructions in the supposed assents of James. So he's acknowledging they also have a book. The Ebionites have a book called the Assents of James. And we'll go into this later, that I actually have a copy of the Assents of James that shows where Paul actually throws down James from the temple steps and things like that. But we'll keep going. As though he were giving orders against the temple and sacrifices, of which the Assents of James talks about, that this particular group, the Ebionites, are against temple sacrifices, and they refuse Paul's letters, and they look at him as an apostate. But we'll keep going. On the fire and on the altar, and much else that is full of nonsense. So again, Epiphanius is disagreeing with their content. We're going to go to 30:16 and 8. Nor are they ashamed to accuse Paul. Now, remember, these are the actual apostles and party and families that know more depth history about Paul. Nor are they ashamed to accuse Paul, right? So he's disagreeing with him again. Here was certain fabrications of their false apostles, villainy and imposture. They say that he was a Tarsian, which he admits himself and does not deny. And they suppose that he was of a Greek parentage, taking the occasion for this from the same passage because of his frank statement, I am a man of Tarsus, a citizen of no mean city. And some of the references are at the bottom. They claim that he was a Greek and the son of a Greek mother and Greek father, but that he had gone up to Jerusalem, stayed there for a while, desired to marry a daughter of a high priest, and had therefore become a proselyte and been circumcised. But since he still could not marry that sort of girl, he became angry and wrote against circumcision, which he did in his letters, and against the Sabbath, which he did in his letters, and the legislation. Right here, 17, but he is making completely false accusations towards serpent, poverty, understanding. For Ebion translated from Hebrew to Greek, which means poor, and on. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. That's why I say to some people, this could be considered, how do you say it? Sacrilegious, and things like that. See, this dude honored humility. He's a runner. No, I don't debate, fam. I'm about peace. I don't debate. I'm about peace. I'm not about winning. I'm not about running races to win. I'm about humility, humility and stuff like that. I just want to share.
Don't look in the chat, brother.
People can choose to do. No, I'm just saying. I'm just addressing this stuff because people have their emotions behind it. My job is just to share the information, and people can do with it as they will.
And I appreciate you doing this.
And so,
he didn't ask to do this. I just want to reiterate. I asked this brother to come on, and he was so graceful, and he came on because last night, Vocab is an acquaintance of mine. He's a great guy. It's about the information, and I really wanted you to present the other side. So Vocab, you did present your information yesterday. This is the other side. And so I appreciate this brother so much. He's not a debater. So enough of that. Keep going. And don't forget that we need to get to that information about the Ebionites, where Vocab was like, no. They were 4th century, and they just weren't even, and Clementine, the pseudo-Clementine homilies are just fiction. I really want you to touch on that.
Okay, thank you for that. So
paraphrasing.
All right, so now many people may or may not be aware of the term Ebionites comes from Strong's number 34. I'll share my screen again to show proof it is that. It comes from Strong's number 34, which means the poor. Let me see, where is it? Where am I at here? StreamYard. Okay. All right, share my screen again. All right, like I said, people could have their feelings about it. They could choose to disagree, whatever. I'm just sharing information. They get to disagree. They could attack me personally, whatever they choose. I'm just sharing the information. That's it. I don't want to debate. And
nobody's going to attack you personally.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying if they do, that's their free will. But anyhow, so when we go to the, let me see. We go to the Blue Letter Bible. All right. The word Ebion comes from the term meaning the poor, and it is in Hebrew, right? I believe some of the first mentionings of the poor in Hebrew comes from the term Ebion. I would like to say maybe it's in Exodus 22:25, right? When you look at that term, you know, when he talks about the poor, when you go to Exodus 22:25, all right, right here, right there. Let me see. Right, Andy, okay, hold on. That's not that reference. Hold on, let me go back. All right, to show proof that no, it is in the Tanakh where the term Ebion comes from, that this term was being used. 1800.
Ebionite, right? They were
Ebionite, correct. And so it's represented by Strong's number 34. Okay,
right. And while you look for that, I do want to add a little bit more for the background.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also, this brother, like I said, I've been following him for years and learning a lot of things. So I'm not just someone who was just opening my head and he was funneling information into. I would back check, go check his information. A lot of times I was like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I'd go look at it and be like, oh, okay, this it's not even about him. The information would fact check. So I just want to point that out too. I'm not saying blindly follow anybody. This information that he's giving, he even gave you the source for Epiphanius. Go look it up. Check it. So.
Right. So poor, if you see right here, age 34, needy, poor, beggar, poor man. So if you go to age 34, I ask anybody to go look at the Hebrew, age 34, Ebion, right? From H14 in the sense of want, especially in feeling. Now, right there, it says needy, poor, beggar, poor man. I'm using the Blue Letter Bible. In want, needy, chiefly poor, needy person, subject to oppression, abuse, needing help, deliverance from trouble, especially as deliverance by Elohim. General reference to lowest class and on. And it'll show the references where it's being used. Deuteronomy 15:4, Exodus 23:6, Deuteronomy 15:11. You guys can feel free to reference this, if you choose. Okay, so the reason why I'm using that as a base, right? If you remember, Paul says that to remember the poor. This is in Galatians. Now, remember, they were not speaking Greek. They were speaking Hebrew. So when we go to Galatians chapter 2, after immediately he goes in talking about those in authority, he goes on talking about remember the poor. I want to say it was Galatians 2, right? So when you go to Galatians 2, let me see. He was told something about remembering the poor. Let me see. He said that he went up and he had seen the brothers of the Adonim right here. But other of the apostles saw none except James, the Adonai's brother. Many people may not be aware. He's the bishop of the Jerusalem assembly, right? That had the authority and the ultimate edict of what was to be authoritative according to the sect of the Ebionites, aka apostles and party, right? So let me see. All right, so when he was saying this in Galatians, to remember the poor, right? He said he would not bless the poor with gifts and things like that. He's talking about the Ebionites, and he's referring to James. You hear him talking about James, John, who seemed to be pillars, right? That he understood that these were the authoritative figures in Jerusalem at the time. Family, historically, it was not Paul.
Galatians 2:10.
Yeah, I think it's Galatians 2:10. All right. So when he says this in Galatians 2, okay, when he says this in Galatians 2, okay, right here. Now look who he names off. And when James, Cephas, who we know to be Peter, aka Simon, who seemed to be pillars, talking about those in authority, perceived the grace that was given unto me. They gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go into the heathen and they into the circumcision. Only they would that we should remember the
Ebionites. Yes.
All praises for that.
Wow. Thank you. Wait, that is a bomb drop.
Right? And then he also says something like, bless the poor with gifts and things like that. So he knew exactly who his authority was and that they were being termed Ebionites. So I've heard people say it goes back to the 3rd and 4th century. Historians and scholars say it from the 40s probably to the 60s. That's where we were talking about the Essence of James. So Epiphanius had acknowledged there was a book called the Essence of James. And in the Essence of James, it's book 133 through like 171 and 72, which shows Paul coming in when they were having a debate. In the book of Acts, it covers it very vaguely, but the Essence of James shows proof that they rejected temple sacrifice. They only used the law and the prophets to determine if Yahshua was the anointed one. They were having disagreements with Ananias. It would be Ananias II and Caiaphas. Gamaliel was like the intermediary, even though he acknowledged he was a part of the apostles' party. And they were going into a heated discussion in the temple. And that's when Paul comes in, okay, with his group and things like that, starts raising an uproar, disrespecting the apostles. He refers to Jesus as Simon Magus historically. And then he says things like, let's tear these guys in pieces. He grabs a brand from the altar. And then he starts bashing the apostles. It says much blood is shed. And then it said that he struck that enemy. It talked about, in the Essence of James, struck James on the head and things like that, or struck him to where which inflicted death blow or something like that. And he did not wish to inflict upon him a second time. And all this I could prove. So Epiphanius had acknowledged that they had an Essence of James. Now the Essence of James is also a similar reference of the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, which is also chronicled by Eusebius. It will be book 133 through 70, where it talks about this historical account, and it was written out. And so that's why I say, when we go into this discussion, I ask people study the Ebionites from the early 1st century and their ordination and their doctrine, because it contradicts and is, very much at basically the apostles. Many people may not. Correct. They
Before you get to that with our brother Khalil, peace to you, Khalil Amani. That's our brother Khalil. He's part of our family. I want to touch on, that information you just gave was so awesome. You know what? I did not know to find that. And I was bringing up Galatians 2 last night. I want to ask you, there's another question from BK Apologist, but I want to ask you about that. The context or the tone of that statement in Galatians 2, would you agree that Paul is making it as if, we're all fine? They said I could go to the heathens. Or would you say that he's more, but it really, in reality, they were not happy with him? Can you touch on that tone? Talk about that.
Correct. And thank you for that. Historically, we talking about historically here that many people may not be aware of, that a lot of the detailed stuff we're talking about is behind the scenes that you hear from other people, not Paul. That's why I said, let's look at the history from other people besides Paul. And I showed you one from Epiphanius. I can show you another one from Eusebius, that Eusebius had acknowledged that the Ebionites rejected Paul's letters and they looked at him as an apostate from the law, right? And I'll show you guys what I mean. On 2 occasions, Paul goes into James because they're hearing about this man who's preaching to the Yehudim about different parts of religion and things like that. And then James comes in. Well, he comes into James, and James gives the ultimate edict. It was dealing with circumcision in Acts 15, whether you had to be circumcised in order to become saved. Do you remember? Because Paul and Barnabas had no small dispute. And then they go in. Paul makes his claim. Peter makes his claim, and then after that, James stands up and gives the ultimate edict. And he tells James, and James tells Paul what the ultimate edict was. He tells him nothing strangled, Paul, which means no meat, nothing sacrificed to idols, right? Because they did not believe in sacrificing any creature or any human to the deity for an appeasement or some type of offering or atonement for sin. They did not believe in let me see, no fornication, nothing strangled, nothing offered to idols. And he said something, and he had said something else, right? So I'll do my best to share everything that I'm saying. So I'll share my screen again. So this rebuffs Paul's letters big time historically. And it reforms Paul to say, okay, Paul, if you want the truth, you want to roll with us, this is how we do it. All right. So I'll do this. All right. We'll go to Young's Literal. And
I just want to set the tone a little bit better. Family, this is when Paul went back 14 years later, correct?
Something like that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And even he doesn't tell the truth, because in his letters, he says he went up by revelation. but it was actually Barnabas that took him up there because he was claiming to have these visions and things like that. And that's a whole nother discussion about the road to Damascus experience, which if we get into, that's going to be more upsetting to people. Was
which
that
he fell out with Barnabas?
Yeah. Was that authentic? So we go to Acts. I want to say it was Acts 21. Let's go to it. Now, this is the Young's literal translation. What they say is this is the rendition of the way it looked literally when it was translated from the Greek into English, right? So right here, we're in Acts 21. Forgive me if I'm moving too fast. I'll try to zoom it in.
Ahead. And then we'll get to the question when you're ready.
But we're in Acts 21. So right here, and on the morrow, Paul was going in with us to James. He already acknowledged that in Galatians 2, that those that were pillars were James, John, and Peter, right? Those that were the Ebion, those that were in authority over the Jerusalem church, right? Let's see what James has to say, the Ebionite, right? All the elders also came, and having saluted them, he was declared by one of each of the things the Most High did among the nations through his ministration. And they, having heard, were glorified the Most High, and they said also to him, you see, brother, how many myriads are that are Jews? We're talking about Judeans who have believed and are zealous of the law. And the reason why that phrase is key is because Paul was only about faith, no works. But James is correcting him. No, brother, this is how we do it over here. We believe in Yahshua, but we're also zealous of the law. You see what I'm saying? That's a major faction between Paul's letters, right? And his letters to the Corinthians, the Galatians, and things like that. Now, what does that say in verse 21? 21. Somebody read that for me. And they are instructed concerning thee. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, and they are instructed concerning thee that apostasy from Moses thou dost teach to all Jews among the nations. So they're saying he teaches apostasy.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, saying not to circumcise the children, nor after the customs to walk. And, that's his gospel. He even says it in his writing. I teach the gospel of uncircumcision. He says it explicitly. Go ahead.
All right. So what's happening is this. Paul will allude to Abraham, right? He alludes to Abraham, which is before Israel, right? This is a great discussion because what Paul is doing is he has a sophist ideology where he's trying to accommodate foreigners into the Hebrews. Like he'll say things like we're all the same. Actually, Paul is the author of what we call replacement theology. He's the reason why we have replacement theology, because people say, we're all spiritual Israel. We're all the same, on and on. You don't have to keep the law. If you listen, this is what people are doing. They'll pull up Paul's letters. But what I'll show people is Paul comes from a Pharisaic sect of an ideology, so he's not going to agree with the Ebionites or the Nazarenes. He's not going to agree with the Essenes. He's not going to agree with the scribes and the Pharisees. Because remember when he was brought before, I forget who that was, he said, well, we were talking about resurrection of the dead, and that really wasn't what was going on. It was dealing with he was being corrected, and the Judeans who had lived in Minor East Asia said, this is the man that preaches apostasy and stuff like that, and preaches against this place. So this is like a major faction between Paul's understanding of the law and the Most High and the actual Israelites, the Judeans of that era. And then he goes and tells him to do what we call a Nazirite vow. But he gives him a Nazirite edict, basically. He gives him a Nazirite edict. And again, we'll go to verse, where are we? 25. This is where he gives him the edict. This is something you have to do, Paul. He said, no such thing, but except you keep yourselves from idol sacrifices, because they did not believe in any sacrifice of any innocent animal to a deity for any appeasement of sin. Remember, Paul propagated that in a lot of his letters. Even if people don't take the book of Hebrews, it indirectly, people say it was attributed, even if it was under the, how do you say it? Even if it was under the, I don't want to say authority, but under the, whatever you want, influence of Paul, whatever it is, it's not attributed to Paul because he doesn't pin the letterhead as he does in the rest of his letters, but he propagates the atoning sacrifice of Yahshua as this atoning son, deity to appease the creator for the sins of all mankind. So he's looking at it from a Pharisaic ideology, accepting the temple sacrifice. But here James is disagreeing with him. He's saying, keep themselves from idol sacrifices. They looked at the Most High accepting the child of Israel for a sacrifice as offering their seed as unto Molech, as like a burnt offering that the nations did to their gods. That's why I say this is a secularist faction. He says, and blood, because remember, Paul was talking about atonement through his blood. You know, we believe in his blood. We have atonement in his blood. In his blood, this is a factional correction here. James is like, nah, Paul, we don't do that. We don't believe in temple sacrifices. We don't deal with anything with blood. That means blood in regards to no blood relation for marriage partners. Because remember, a lot of his family were the so-called Herodian princesses, right? Drusilla, Bernice. You see what I'm saying? That were very much involved in incest, dealing with the Herodians, marrying their uncle, marrying their cousins. That this was members of his family, that people don't understand that they knew about that. And then it says from things strangled, which means they were vegetarians. No animal being killed for food would be accepted among them, if you want to roll with us, Paul, and fornication, of which many of his relatives, like I said, that's why I say it's a long discussion. Mm-hmm. And then after this discussion, he supposedly does this 7-day thing and on, but then he brought Greeks into the temple, of which different books will say, supposing that he had brought these Greeks into the temple, right? And you remember Paul would say things like, we're breaking down the middle wall of partition between us, talking, because remember there was a Gentile marker in the temple that you don't go past if you're a Gentile.
Right. There's a
right?
strong. Mm-hmm.
And so Paul will say, Christ being the sacrifice is broken down the middle wall of partition. So he's advocating and accommodating foreigners in his theology, right? And we see this turn into a big event when they're like, hey, he brought Gentiles and Greeks into the temple and has defiled his holy place. And so right here, they're saying who is saying Trophimus, the Ephesian in the city with him, who were supposing that Paul brought into the temple. And also the city was moved and there was running together, all the people having laid hold on Paul, and they were drawing him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. So this is, I consider this to be an authentic historical account of what really was going on in the early first century. So what I'm doing is I'm trying my best to prove that Paul did not have the heat, so to speak, like we would like to believe.
Okay.
Paul,
and I
unfortunately, was rejected by the Jerusalem church and the apostles. He was being corrected on 2 occasions about the ideology with soteriology. So like I said, people could choose to disagree. That's fine. I accept that people are going to disagree. But all I'm doing is sharing the history behind it.
Can we get back
They rejected Paul. And Paul was upset because he wrote about it, talking about, do I need letters of commendation from you? He was upset.
He was writing about it. Can we talk about the question? I want to quickly, before we get too far off with Khalil, the Ebionites denying him as a Jew and a Pharisee. Can you address that for us?
Yeah, I did with 30:16 and 8.
Oh,
Remember I did that earlier?
Okay, yeah. I was too busy in the chat getting
no worries.
Responding.
I could go back to it. To those who may not have seen it.
Peace,
right here,
Queen.
30:16 and 8. Right here, I'll just zoom it a little bit. Right here, the Ebionites. This is 30:16 and 8. They say that he was a Tarsian, which he admits himself and does not deny. And they suppose that he was of a Greek parentage, taking occasion for this from the same passage because of the frank statement, I am a man of Tarsus, a citizen of no mean city. They then claim that he was a Greek and the son of a Greek mother and a Greek father, but that he had gone to Jerusalem, stayed there for a while, desired to marry the daughter of a high priest, and had therefore become a proselyte and been circumcised. But since he still could not marry that sort of girl, he became angry and wrote against circumcision and against the Sabbath and against our legislation. So I'm just saying, these aren't feelings. I'm doing my best to share. Oh, shoot. My bad. I didn't share my screen completely.
How long ago did I start seeing you on Facebook? What, 4 years ago? 5?
Probably like 4 or 5 years ago. But that's the reference right there. Epiphanius Pinarian, a.k.a. medicine chest. So we see that there's factions historically early on that we may not know about that I expect people to disagree with. And that's okay. And so we could go to Eusebius, Ecclesiastical History, right? We could go to Eusebius, who would say that also, let me see if I can find it. Eusebius' Ecclesiastical History acknowledges that they rejected him and his letters, basically going back to the early first century, because he's using that same reference and narrative as them rejecting him and things like that. Let me see if I can go to it. That Eusebius is acknowledging in that same era the Ebionites rejected him, and they looked at him as an apostate from the law. All right, either Loeb Classical Library, you guys could reference some of the more how do you say it? The one I have is Loeb Classical Library, which I believe is one of Harvard's or something like that. All right, School of Theology at Claremont. All right, let me know if you guys can see this clearly. All right, but right here they're gonna say, all right, they're gonna say that this would be 327. I'll give the reference of this. Okay, this would be in 327. Basically, this is going to be Eusebius Ecclesiastical History. This would be in 327. Let me see. Is this book 6? Hold on. Let me see. Let me go back. Is this book 6? Let me see what this says. See what books this is. Clement. Okay, right there. Can you guys see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. All
right. Let me go into it. Let me see if it'll show it. All right. So right here, it's going to be in 327. Book 3, chapter 27. I'm giving the reference, right? That the Ebionites basically are saying that they disagreed with Paul, and the reference of Eusebius, I want to say, is in the 3rd century. All right, let's see. All right, 327. Give me a moment. I want to make sure that I'm at the right. Okay, chapter 3. All right, so when you go to 327, it's going to show proof that in the early 1st century, the Ebionites rejected Paul. All right, and they looked at him like an apostate. All right, from the law. What am I saying? Just watch your eyes, you guys. I apologize. My laptop is still loading as I'm going into it. Okay, because like I said, the 3rd and 4th centuries didn't agree with the Ebionites. They would rather take the letters of Paul and things like that, but yet they acknowledged their material was in existence, most of which today is in fragments. And we could talk about that later. The Gospel of the Nazarenes, the Gospel of the Ebionites, and the Gospel according to the Hebrews vary greatly as the Aramaic originals from the Greek text and on. So right here, now he's going to say the heresy, because this is him disagreeing with I don't know how to get this off of my screen, this little thing down here. Let me see. Let me see if I get this out of here. I don't know how to get this out of here. The bottom.
What you want me to do? You want me to
trying to get this bottom? No, I'm trying to get my bottom tab out of here. I have a laptop.
There's no X. There's no X for you to just clear it out right there.
Let me see if I can do that. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. So Eusebius is disagreeing. He's saying the spirit of wickedness, however, being unable to shake some in the love of the Yahshua or the Messiah, and yet finding them susceptible of his impressions, they other respects brought them over to his purpose. These were properly called Ebionites by the ancients as those who cherished the low and mean opinions of Yahshua. Like, again, he's disagreeing. They considered him a plain and common man and justified only by his advances in virtue, and that he was born of the Virgin Mary by natural generation. So this natural is going to chime with what we call Roman Catholicism, soteriology, and the virgin birth. You see what I'm saying? Because this is a secularist belief that Eusebius is disagreeing with. Right? Because Paul believes in the virgin birth, that Jesus is like a demigod and the sacrifice, God in flesh for all humankind, taken upon the sin of Adam. The Ebionites looked at every man is responsible for their own sin. They saw that the Most High required mercy, not sacrifice. That's what I'm saying. These are factional divisions between the beliefs. Okay, it says with them, the observance of the law altogether was necessary. So that's going to chime with Paul's beliefs. Remember, you hear James say faith without works is dead. I would say Torah, doers of the law, right? Not just by faith, right? We're judged according to our works. Moving on. It says, with them, the observance of the law was altogether necessary, as if they could not be saved by only by faith in Christ and a corresponding life. So they're saying not just by faith, but also what? What does that mean? By a corresponding life, talking about doing, living, and walking in accordance with the law. We just read that in Acts 21, verses 18 through 25, where he said, we don't just believe, we're zealous for the law, Paul. So we're seeing an alignment, right?
The whole book of James. Well,
right. And a lot of people may not know the one who he's talking to in James 2 is talking about Paul. He's varying from Paul's adversarial style of doctrine. But we'll keep moving on. It says, others besides these, but of the same name, avoided the absurdity of the opinions maintained by the former, not denying that Adonai was born of a virgin by the Holy Ghost, and yet in like manner, not acknowledging his preexistence. That's another faction. People believe Yahshua had a preexistence. The Ebionites do not. It says, though he was Elohim, the word and wisdom, they turned aside into the same irreligion. As with the former, they evinced great zeal to observe the ritual service of the law. These indeed thought on the one hand that all the epistles of the apostle, now this is in reference to Paul, ought to be rejected, calling him an apostate from the law. So this is talking about Paul. We're dealing with what, the 60s? You see what I'm saying? Acknowledging the Ebionites, rejecting Paul. They're looking at him as an apostate. We just showed that in Acts 21, according to Young's literal translation. What is this we hear about you, Paul, preaching apostasy from Moses? You know, about just believe and things like that. What we believe in was zealous, Paul. Here, let me tell you what we're supposed to do. Nothing, no fornication, nothing strangled, nothing to idols. You see what I'm saying? This is what we do, Paul. We're doers of the law. You see what I'm saying? So that's a factional variance and on. And so that's what I'm saying. Historically, people could disagree. They can argue. They don't have to like it. But I'm doing my best to share the history of it and let the people in the audience be the judge of what they choose to take.
Right. Let me jump in and ask you some questions about the background. Somebody was like, let the brother talk. I want this brother to talk, but I'm jumping in with questions, and I hope you don't mind, because I know the audience are thinking some of the things I'm thinking, and you're a very great source of information right now. So with that said, forgive me for jumping in, but there's a reason.
No worries.
So can you give us, yes, okay, so we see you've proven, you set the groundwork. Look, Paul was in opposition, and they were bumping heads. But now talk to us about the thing. I like that information on the Roman. Jacob Berman is talking about Roman agent. You agreed. Why is Paul, we got the background on him being, you showed who he is in the beginning of this string. Why is Paul doing this starkly different gospel? What is his agenda? Is it backed with Romans? Can you talk to us about that?
Okay. Well, again, and thank you for the question. Well, again, the thing was Paul had a pharisaic background. He saw the law. He saw the law as through the eyes of a Pharisee, where they believed in, as you say, remember what Yahshua said about the Pharisees, that they were lax on the law and things like that. You remember? But James was giving his directive in James 2 when he said, don't you know that if you claim to keep all the laws, but you transgress one, you're guilty of all. That was a Pharisaic ideology. They believed in keeping every jot and tittle of the law, right? So he's propagating his own understanding of the Pharisaic ideology. Now, here's the thing. Now, we could go to Josephus, right? Here's the thing, as why this all aligns with Paul most likely being a foreigner and not a Judean, right? So let me hold here. Let me see if I can pull this up, where we talk about there is another writer by the name of Josephus. And Josephus had said that all the Essenes were Judeans and the Pharisees were more of the other foreign groups. And that's why I say this is a good discussion, right? Let me see if I can pull up some of Josephus, because the reason why I'm answering it this way is because Paul had a different idea because he came from a different sect. And because of his ability, Josephus had acknowledged that Paul was a robber of churches and robbers of Judeans, being given that ability by the high priest and given that ability by the Herodians, right? And so I could go into that as well, but let me see if I can find the, okay, let's go ahead and go to Josephus. Josephus had acknowledged, let me see if I could go into my Josephus complete works. Just bear with me for a minute as I pull it up. It's gonna be Antiquities 20. Okay, it's gonna be Antiquities. We're gonna go to Josephus. Okay.
I'm gonna type it in the chat. Josephus.
We're gonna go to Antiquities. Okay.
You gave me a great idea. I think that when we do these shows, we should have somebody, maybe a moderator, scribing just
okay.
that'd be good. And
Okay.
timestamps.
All right. So
Josephus, Antiquities, and what part of
we're
that?
going to go to book 20.
Okay.
Again, like I said, I'm just sharing the history. People don't have to agree with it, but I'm just sharing the history. Okay. All right. So we go right here to Antiquities. I'm just going to show you guys the head of this. This is the works of Josephus.
Okay, I'm going to screenshot you.
Now he was in existence, I want to say from 37 CE, what we call the Common Era, up to like 100. So he was very much a contemporary of that day, right? As far as a lot of the history, I've read through his Antiquities, which is very much in detail about the Romans and some of the wars with the Parthians and some of the hippodromes and some of the what do you call it? The citadels set up by Herod through Rome, Mark Antony. He also has Wars of the Jews that he covers also, which I believe started around the 60s and ultimately went all the way through into the destruction of the temple by Titus and on. So right here, that's what it says. He was born Yosef ben Mattathias, 37 CE, and on. So right here, in Jerusalem of a priestly and royal family, he excelled in his studies of the Hebrew law and studied. So he did study with the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes. So again, we were talking about the 7 sects, right? One of the 7 was the Sadducees, the other one was the Pharisees, and the other was of the Essenes. Now, remember, we had read in Epiphanius that he called them Oseans, but it was really the Essenes. Right. And he explained where they were located if anybody wants those references. Okay, so that's
and he
a little
also
bit of his
studied
background.
with them. I didn't know that.
That was a little bit of his background. He was somewhat of a general, and he liked fighting and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But he had admitted that Rome was talked about in the law and the prophets, is why he tried to get the Israelites to stop fighting against Rome, as he was in belief, as in Daniel, that Rome was to be the conquest and that it was like, useless and that we would just destroy ourselves, whatever. They did not look at him 100% as trustworthy. But still, this is an account. I don't know if Philo goes from like what? He goes from like 70 or 80 up into like 30 or 40. So he's a little bit around that time. But we're going to go to 20. We're going to go to 20, chapter 9. We're going to go to 20, chapter 9. And we're going to show proof that Paul was used to robbing. And I'll show proof of that. He acknowledges this in his letters, that he robbed people. And remember, rob deals with violence and tyranny. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Right. And that he was operating with what we call impunity. So who was in authority then? The Herodians and the Romans. So it's like, how is he
being
able to...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And if you think about it, it's even, he admits that because he said he was persecuting them. You think he was just killing them? Of course he was robbing them too.
But he also acknowledged he robbed churches. He said it in his letters. But then he goes over and says, but I have done none of these things. He acknowledges you're supposed to get paid for the ministry. The Ebionites and the apostles were against it. They were about sharing, keeping all things in common. So that's what I'm saying, as why he's doing what he's doing is based off of his beliefs, which is contrary to those of the apostles and the Ebionite party. So there's factions, and I'm doing my best to show it. Like right here, we're going to go to 20. Where are we going to go to 20? All right. And I'm going to try my best to highlight it. All right, I'm going to try my best to highlight it because I know I'm moving and on, but I'm just sharing some of the historical sources. Okay.
And then I wanted to get to some of the questions. We have some good questions for you.
But it says, but Ananias was too hard for the rest by his riches, which enabled him to gain those that were most ready to receive. Costobarus and Saulus, that's who we're talking about, Paul, did themselves get together a multitude of wicked wretches, and this because they were of the royal family. What are we talking about? We're talking about the Herodians. Right? Well, now we just read that in Epiphanius that they said that he was a Greek. Basically, he was not an Israelite. And now we have another account that's saying he's of the so-called royal family of the Herodians. Wow. And so they obtained favor among them, right? Talking about the Herodians, because of their kindred to Agrippa. This is going to work against cognitive dissonance to people who want to quote Paul and call him a Benjamite. History says he was not, but we'll keep going. But still, they used violence with the people and were very ready to plunder those that were weaker than themselves. And from that time, it principally came to pass that our city was greatly disordered and that all things grew worse and worse. So that's one account. So I want to hold there, right? When you go into this discussion, let me see. It was talking about how, in reference to this discussion about how Remember, if you guys remember, in the Maccabees, you remember the Edomites were allowed to assimilate with the Judeans, and from that day they were called Yehudim. Right?
Yes.
And so there's certain parts of the Gospels that'll say we're children of Abraham. We were never in slavery to any man, according to the Greek gospel. Well, who would that be? Those weren't Israelites. We would say that those would have been Edomites that were a part of that descendancy that had took circumcision or suffer to be excommunicated, exiled, or even killed, that they chose circumcision. We're dealing with the Maccabees, right? But I want to go into the philosophical sects among the that it talks about of the philosophical sects. We're going to go to wars, right? We're going to show proof that basically that the Pharisees were foreigners. The Sadducees were being replaced by King Herod, basically, or what we call in Hebrew the Zadokim, right? Or the Zadokites. They were being replaced by foreigners. One of the last one was, I believe it was Archelaus, the younger brother of Mariamne, was executed in the pool, which was one of the descendants when he put on the breastplate to erect the Levitical priesthood in that day. Herod got wind of it and went and executed Mariamne. This was his wife, which was of the Hasmonean, aka Maccabean dynasty and bloodline. They were being killed. They were being killed, and so because of that, they were being replaced.
Was he also? Did he also kill his own children, or is that not true?
Yes. He killed his own children for how do you say it? He was like a psychopath. He killed his own children for, I believe, conspiring against him. I believe he eventually killed Mariamne and things like that because he loved her, but he hated her. Talk about toxic relationships, right? But we're going to go to wars. Let's go to wars. All right. According to these accounts, we're going to go to Wars 2. All right. We're going to go to chapter 8. Watch your eyes, fam. All right. Watch your eyes. So I apologize. Watch your eyes. All right. When you go to Wars 8, right here. All right. So right here, we're going to go to Wars 2, 8, and 2, which is 119. So Wars 2, 8, and 2, 119. For there are three philosophical sects among the Jews, or the Judeans, right? This is according to Josephus. The followers of the first, which are the Pharisees. Remember, we had talked about that some regards to Epiphanius in his day. The second, the Sadducees. And the third sect, which pretends to a severe discipline, are called the Essenes. These last, and I'll highlight it, are Judeans by birth, right? So what are we talking about? About the other sects. The other sects in that time were foreigners. Pharisees, Sadducees. You guys get it? The Essenic sect were the Judeans, basically, that you could only be of the tribe of Judah to join the Essenes. We get into the Sakari later, but right here it says these last are Jews by birth and seem to have a greater affection for one another than the other sects have. The Essenes reject pleasures as an evil, but esteem continence and the conquest over passions to be virtue. They neglect wedlock, but choose other persons' children, which are pliable and fit for their own learning, and esteem them to be of their kindred. He talks about other sects of the Essenes too, but we'll keep going. And form them according to their own manners, and they do not absolutely deny fitness of marriage and the succession of mankind thereby continued, but they guard against the lascivious behavior of women and are persuaded that none of them preserve their fidelity to one man. These men are despisers of riches and so very communicative as raises our admiration, nor is there anyone to be found among them who has more than the other. If you remember in the book of Acts, it talks about they kept all things in common and they shared among themselves. Remember what Yahshua said, sell that which you have and distribute it to who? The poor, or the who? The Ebion, right? If you remember that in the gospel, right?
Blessed are the poor.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. It goes all the way back to Exodus, when we talk about that narrative of the Ebion, right? Wow. So they believed in sharing, right? They didn't believe in taking riches. They were against wicked wealth. They were against temple sacrifice. They were against any form of iniquity and injustice, right? They were about giving food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, and dispersing to any of those who had need. They did not believe in making money off of any ministry, contrary to Paul. Paul was like, look, you should not muzzle the ox or treadeth out the corn. Do you not know that they which labor about the altar are partakers of the altar, and on? But then he goes on and says, I rob churches, but yet I've used none of these things. So scholars say that Paul's kind of playing different crowds when he's in different assemblies. he's playing them in this letter, and he's a little being dishonest over here. But we'll keep going. But it says, nor is there any one of them found who has more than the another, for it is a law among them. You guys see that? Let's highlight that. That this is a faction. This is a differing belief in that era. We're talking about what was Josephus, 37 to 100 CE. Okay, when we're dealing with the different sects. Okay, he says that those who come to them must let what they have be common to the whole order. So that's their law, fam. No wealth for ministry, none. And what did Yeshua say? He said, as you have freely received, freely what? Freely give.
Can I come in? Can I jump in? I know that people are like, you're cooking so much with, okay, but I just want to add this too. The instance when the man and woman were actually put to death for not sharing or for not being honest about their wealth. Would that also lend to, even though it's the apostles, it's not the exact Essenes, but it's the same concept and philosophy, right? That's how serious they were.
Say that again. The same what?
There's an account in the I can't remember which epistle. Maybe it's in Acts. It's in Acts, and I don't know their names. There was a couple. They sold their land. They lied about how much they got, held back a portion, were put to death over that. So I think what I'm saying is when I look at what you're saying about their teachings of the law being you have to come on share this wealth, even though it said they were put to death for lying, they held back a portion. Are you familiar with that part of the Acts?
but here's the thing. I don't think they were put to death. But again, I want to be clear because this is going to upset.
But it does say they were put to death in the book, right?
I don't know if they were put to death according to that account, or if it was more like they gave up the ghost. This one just dropped down dead, and they gave up the ghost. If I'm not mistaken, right? And so there's a lot to that. But I've questioned the historical accuracy of these accounts, and because I'm very technical, so I'm not sure if that happened 100%. Accurate. I don't see it being depicted anywhere else. Acts,
why do you think it was put in there? Why do you think they put it?
Acts has been proven to not be the most historically accurate document, and there's a number of different ways to show that why Acts is not the most historically, and I'll explain why. Why didn't we know about James in the book of Acts? Whoever it is that wrote Acts, right? Why don't we know that James was the brother of Yeshua and was the bishop of the Jerusalem church? They just write him in Acts 15 as if we're just supposed to know who this James is. We don't know that that's James, not the brother of John, but James, who we would call the less or the son of Alphaeus in the Gospels. That's what I'm saying. These are great discussions. I'm not sure about the authenticity of that account, but yeah, I remember it in regards to someone holding back some money. And supposedly, according to that account, one gave up the ghost, and then your sister, your wife is at the door, something like that. They're ready to carry the out, according to that account. So I get that as far as the narrative. But I wanted to show this, and I wanted to show this in conclusion. And I thank you for bringing that up. I want to show this in conclusion. Okay, that remember we had talked about Epiphanius had acknowledged that they had what was called in the sense of James, right? When you go to Epiphanius of Salamis. Let's go back. He acknowledged right here in 16. Now, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to do my best to highlight it when you're talking about the Ebionites. Right here, that they lay down certain assents and instructions in the supposedly assents of James. I'll do my best to highlight it. So I want to make this connection again about the Ebionites with James, John, and the apostles. Okay, do you guys see that, right? They lay down certain assents and instructions in the supposed assents of James. So I'm going to go in to show you guys what is in the assents of James historically that I was able to garner that I don't even know. This is hard to get. It shows a Syriac and a Latin on different sides, and I'll be able to share it with my screen later. But I'm doing this to connect the Ebionites, at least, if not the 40s, at least in the 60s. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah,
when we go to the beginning, I want to show proof of that this is Epiphanius, and he's disagreeing with the Ebionites. Okay, as you guys can see right there, Ebionites still in the same chapter.
We don't see it. You need to screen share it again.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. We're good there. Thank you for that. Okay. So when you go to the beginning of the Ebionite section, it will be 30. Do you see that? 30. against the Ebionites.
We don't
right?
see it.
Oh, thank you for that.
You need to screen share again.
Thank you for that. Okay.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
that. Sorry about that. Okay. So let's go. So right here, that's what you were saying. Okay, I get it now. I thought you were saying I was moving too fast. Okay.
No.
Okay, so
you're doing great. This
all
is
right,
awesome.
so and thank you for that. And I mean that. Okay, so right here, that's Epiphanius. That's book 30, right? That he's disagreeing with the Ebionites right here, Followings right there, okay? He's talking about the Ebionites. So when you go down to 30, we're going to go down to chapter or whatever we call book 18. That's why I say watch your eyes, because I can't just scroll to it. I can't just jump to it. I got to scroll to it.
We got it. You're fine. You're good.
Okay.
The people appreciate
it. So now
it.
when we go to Ebionites right here, I want to go back, making a proof. What did I say? It was 30. What did I say? It was 16. Okay, right there. They speak of other acts of the apostles. So remember, many people may not know, there were two acts. There was one that were the acts, more so the ones that we read today are the one written by Luke, talking about the Nazarene acts of the, the one written by Luke was more like the gospel of Paul, right? And I could go into prove that historically that Luke wrote that when Paul says, according to my gospel, he's talking about the book of Acts. And I can prove that historically. But there was another one called the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles.
Let me hold that up. Hold on. Keep that up.
This is the one that we believe Epiphanius is referring to. They speak of other acts of the apostles. This is the one that we're talking about here, according to the Ebionites, right? When we talk about their materials that they considered good historical records, which was, we say, written by either Clement or Titus Flavius Clemens, aka Clement of Alexandria, right? That it was comprised of both, between Clement of Alexandria and also and also Clement, Pope of Rome, which was a traveling companion. And we'll get to the Clementine homilies in a minute, how Peter refers to Paul as the enemy and misrepresenting his doctrine. We'll get to that later. But this right here was a chronicle of Peter and Clement, and how Clement hooks up with the apostles after hearing Barnabas' preaching in Rome, and he's dispatched to them basically in southern Palestine, and then he's being told to go with Peter because they're going to go deal with a wretch named Simon Magus, which many scholars believe is Paul or Saul of Tarsus, that he has this big long debate with about the gods and things like that. So if you go look at 30:16-6, they speak of other acts of the apostles, which many scholars believe is the Nazarene Acts, aka the recognitions of Clement. Okay, so if you hold on there, the 30:16-7, they lay down certain assents and instructions in the supposed assents of James. So this is what I do when I get there. I'm saying, okay, in the sense of James, what is that? Let's go to it. Let's find out what in the sense of James is. Okay, all right. So let's see, when we're talking about the Ebionites, let's see what this has in it. Okay, we talk about, their existence, this and that. Again, we're talking about the 60s. Okay. So, look at that. You see that? There is an actual archive, the Internet Archives. And if anybody asks, I can share this information. Please feel free to ask me. I'll give it to you upon request. Okay? So we're just waiting for it to load. Okay, so I'll show some of the reference of it. This one here is by Vorst. This one here is by Robert E. Van Vorst. Okay? The author of this Essence of James. So when I see a reference, I go grab it. I want to go read it. I want to see what's in the material, since it was being stated by Epiphanius. School of Theology at Claremont. Okay, the Essence of James: History and Theology of a Jewish Christian Community. Again, it's indirectly referring to the Ebionim or the Ebionites, right here. So let's see what year this is. Okay, watch your eyes. All right. When you talk about this literature, okay, dissertations, The Essence of James by Robert E. Van Vorst. History, okay, I showed that already. Okay, so this right here says 1988, Urban Theological Seminary, okay? All right, so when you go to The Essence of James, this deals with an account more in detail than what we have in today's book of Acts. This goes way more into that detail, right, about what was going on with the apostles. It goes into a commentary, basically, about what was happening with Paul and things like that. Let me see. No, let me go back. All right, so now do you guys see right there? 141 and 2, these are actual reference. Left means Latin. The right means Syriac. So you can compare the two. of which Epiphanes had acknowledged. He had a book called the Essene of James. This is the Essene of James. So what's happening is this, is that James is explaining, I believe, to Clement about why all of these different secularist groups are against them in the early first century, because Clement wanted to know what's up with this messianic figure. He was tired of these syllogisms and the philosophy and the debates of the Romans. He wanted to know about this messianic figure that was uniting people, healing folks, had a great ministry. So he's dispatched there. And then he's getting this account from James about what was going on with the early first century and what is the right doctrine. So what James is doing is he's taking them all the way back to Genesis, and he runs them all the way through the history of the Jews, right? Dealing with Genesis, dealing with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and on. And he acknowledges that there were things in the law that people thought were of Moses when we talk about the laws of sacrifices. That's why I say Epiphanes is going to say there's impious material, right? Let me see. I want to say that was like in 130, right? Because he acknowledges that they had thought that certain laws back then were of Moses, right? But like I said, if anybody wants to look at it, I can share it. Okay. Anyway, so right here. All right. We can start on 137.1. 137.1. I'm looking on the right side here. We're dealing with the Syriac side. And with these things, he also set apart a place for them, which is alone, to permit it to offer sacrifices. Let me see. 136. Let me see. Hold on. Okay. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Okay. All right. Okay, right here. So 136.1. This is according to the Essene of James. Therefore, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai and saw that vice, as he was a good and faithful steward, he discerned that it was not possible. Again, this is James talking to Clement about what's going on with the actual law and with these groups. And let me give you the history of it, Clement, since you don't know. If I'm not mistaken, right? He says that it was not possible. He discerned that it was not possible to take from the people all the sickness of the love of idol worship. Remember, because they were in Egypt for 230 years or something like that, right? Which was in them from the long stay, and that they could not easily be riddled of it and bring it to an end because of their evil upbringing with the Egyptians. Because of this, he did permit them to sacrifice, but he told them that they could only do this in the name of Elohim, so that he could cut off and bring to an end one half of this sickness. But as the correction of the other half, it was reserved for another time in the hand of someone else, as was right, in whose care it would be, in the one of whom he said, a prophet whom the Most High your Elohim, this is in reference to Deuteronomy 18, verses 15 through 18, whom the Ebionites referred to Yeshua as the true prophet. If you go look at some of the Clementine and the Nazarene Acts and the Essene of James, they refer to him as the true prophet, but we'll keep going. It shall be known, right here, a prophet shall the Most High your Elohim raise up for you like me, hear him in everything. Anyone who does not obey him shall surely die. It shall be known that this one has given up his soul to destruction, 137.1. And with these things, he also set apart a place for them, which alone was permitted to offer sacrifices. All of this was promulgated to them until a more convenient time should come when they would be able to understand that the Most High desires mercy and not sacrifices. So they're saying the Most High did not decree this. They're saying Moses did this because he knew that they were so wicked. Okay, here's a temple because you guys were there for so long. I got to work out this wickedness from you guys. Only do this in the name of the Most High. Only do this here in this temple. But then later, one's going to come that's going to eradicate it and do away from it. As you hear Yeshua say, mercy, not sacrifice. He was throwing out those money changers in the temple and things like that, right? And he says that the Most High desires mercy, not sacrifice. 137.2. That prophet who declares these things will be sent to them, and those who believe in him will be led by the wisdom of Elohim to the strong place of the land, which is for the living. There they will be preserved from the war, which will surely come to their own destruction upon those who, because of their division, do not obey. But this war they did not come hastily and on. Suddenly, even as before the arrival of the coming prophet, they had prepared for the abolition of sacrifices. For many times in the providence of Elohim, that war came upon them, and they would be in captivity and be carried away to another nation. We know this over and over again, historically and biblically, that Israelites were carried constantly. And why was the temple continually destroyed? Let's find out. Since they then did not have that place which the lawgiver permitted them for sacrifice, but were keeping his law without sacrifices, they were restored and redeemed. This happened many times to them so that they might understand that when they keep the law without sacrifices, they were redeemed. What do we read in James directed overseas communities? Nothing strangled Paul, nothing sacrificed to idols. You guys see what I'm saying? You see the connection, right? And it says they went out and were exiled from it so that they would cease and offer sacrifices no more. But they were slow to learn this, and it was good only to a few. So what does that mean? Even back then, only a few understood that the Most High never ordained these so-called sacrifices. Even the knowledge of those few was darkened by the multitudes who thought otherwise. So even those few that understood this were often overshadowed and overpowered, right? Darken those multitudes who thought otherwise, who were not able to perceive all this, for to distinguish and understand the cause of this is not given to the multitudes, but only the few can understand it. That's why I say people are going to naturally disagree. But I want to hold here. I want to go to the culmination of Paul coming in and destroying James and warring with the apostles. We're going to go to 170. Okay? We're going to go to 170. Excuse me for jumping. If you guys want the reference, you guys can reference it yourself. It's a great read. The Essene to James goes from 1.33 to like 1.71. It is covered in the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles. It is. When we talk about Clementine literature in regards to the Ebionites, of which Epiphanes had acknowledged was in their existence, and they acknowledged that these were the historical accounts. Now, this goes into the discussion that they were having if Yeshua was the anointed one. We're going to go to 168 and 1. And I have to draw this out. When Gamaliel said these things, because remember, Gamaliel had protected them from the assaults of Caiaphas, Ananias, and the different secularist groups. Remember, you're dealing with followers of John the Baptist, Simon Magus, the Sadducees, you're dealing with the Pharisees, you're dealing with these different secularist groups that are looking at the law from different vantage points, and they're in a hostile environment. We're talking about the 12 apostles.
The Sicarii.
Possibly, but I believe they came later. But definitely.
How much later?
Definitely, I would say like the 60s. Yeah, I would say, probably around the same time. I agree. But the Zealots, the Sicarii, we're talking about secularist factions. And so Gamaliel is protecting them from the assaults of these other groups. He's like, men and brethren, and I think he says this in Acts, if it is of the Most High, it will stand. If it is not, you will know, and things like that. Please, men, be cool with your understanding, and talking to Caiaphas and Ananias. Now, the attention to this is funny because it says after that, Caiaphas and Ananias began to look at Gamaliel suspect, because Gamaliel had acknowledged he was a part of the apostles' party in their faith. Right? I'm just kind of paraphrasing a little bit the chapters, in between. So right here, what Gamaliel said these things, Caiaphas was not much pleased. Look at that. I thought he supposed something in his mind against him, and he took himself to probe a question. As of quietly mocking Gamaliel and James, the head bishop. You guys see that? Not Paul.
Yeah, the head priest.
The chief of the priests asked that the debate and the disputation about the Messiah be drawn only from Scripture. Back then, I'm telling people historically, they did not have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They did not have 1 Corinthians and things like that in at their disposal. They didn't have Revelation. They had the law and the prophets, right? Remember Isaiah 8, to the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, is because there's no light. So they knew they could only turn to the law and the prophets, these varying sects, on how they would see the law. So
I gotta jump in and ask you a question. I'm sorry. When you talk on Caiaphas, for those out there who also this is in their mind, how do we get from Caiaphas being a part of the Sanhedrin or the council to persecute and execute Christ?
I believe,
and now he's here with the apostles.
Well, I believe Caiaphas, excuse me if I'm not mistaken, I believe Caiaphas came from Damascus or something like that. He was being put up by the Herodians and the Romans. That's what I'm saying. When we talk about these people that were in authority, he might have been a Hebrew. I'm not 100% sure, but he was brought from another area, if I'm not mistaken. That's according to I believe Eusebius. But right here, they're going into this debate, right, about is Yeshua the anointed one that Deuteronomy 18 verses 15 to 18 is talking about, right? As far as his disputes and doing away with sacrifice, because remember, Yeshua was saying things somewhat contradictory to the Pharisees, somewhat contradictory to the Sadducees, somewhat contradictory to some of these other groups, and it's turning into a really hostile environment. Okay, so they're saying, let us only draw from the scripture, so that he said we may know if Yeshua is certainly he who is anointed or not. And James said, first we must seek from the debate where the debate might rightly be made, but after great coercion, he was rightly compelled to agree that this debate be made from the law. We're talking about the Torah and the Navaim. James likewise spoke in his speech about the prophets and showed that everything they said was taken from the law. Talking about when they were refuting these different groups, everything that one apostle said, like somebody from the Samaritans would say something against Christ. And then Thomas would stand up and say, no, this, and he would quote a scripture. Somebody from the followers of John the Baptist would say, well, how is Christ bigger than John the Baptist? And then they would show a scripture, well, prepare the way in the wilderness and this and that. And they would use like different scripture references, right? This is what they're talking about. When these different groups were assaulting them, one apostle would stand up and defend themselves against this group of all these different, like somewhat hostile factions. That's why they're saying they were sharing everything that they knew about Yahshua as they were walking with him from the law. It says, then he also spoke about the book of Kings, how and when and by whom they were written and how one ought to use them. Then he again spoke in his speech about the law and showed how those things are in them. At the end of this speech, he spoke about the anointed one and completed great arguments without measure from every place that Yahshua is the anointed one, in whom everything in it about his humble coming is fulfilled. We're talking about this is James. This is his brother. Okay, the best one to explain, no, he's the anointed one, you guys. This is my brother, right? For there are two comings of him, one in humbleness in which he has come, but the second in glory in which he will come and rule over those who believe in him, who do all those things that he commanded. He also said many things about the Paraclete. Now, the Paraclete, I believe, is a Greek way of saying the Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit and baptism, and persuaded all the people with the chief priest through 7 complete days that they should immediately hasten and come for baptism. Now, watch this. Then a certain man. Now, this is where it's going to get good. Historically speaking, this is indirectly talking about Paul. This is where Paul comes in. Then a certain man who was an enemy, bing bong, came into the temple and toward the altar while shouting and saying, what are you doing, O men of Israel? This is 171. Men of Israel, that you are so carried off by miserable men who go astray after a magician. And I will prove when he's talking about Simon the magician, he's talking about Jesus. And I'll go into prove that later, that Paul had another Jesus that he had in his mind, contrary to those who walk with the apostle. But we'll keep going. While he was saying other things like these, he heard James speaking other things against them and overcoming them. He began to make great tumult, so that the good things that were being properly said could neither be examined in quietness nor understood, and so believed. So Paul comes in bringing this big uproar. So now people can't even hear what's going on with James, and he's disrupting this whole event. Then he shouted even more about the foolishness and feebleness of the priests and reviled. Now, if you guys remember, a while back, he was thrown out of the temple for his letters and corrected in front of his groups and things like that. Paul, Scholars say that Paul was upset because he believed that the attack on Paul by the Zealots was being led by James, which is completely contrary. But remember, all of these different Judean factions had united against the Romans, whether they were, and I believe the Sakar were mainly Edomites to a certain degree, but the Essene sects were predominantly, if I'm not mistaken, not all Judeans, right? So they united. You had the Nazarenes, you had the Zealots, right? You had the Sakari, if I'm not mistaken, and they all united. And so this group is wanting to assault Paul. If you guys remember, they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. They cursed themselves with a curse, right? So anyway, so right here, right? Paul is probably, as scholars say, upset over that he knows exactly who this is because he had went in there times before and was corrected and rebuffed on his erroneous letters. So right here, then he shouted even more about the foolishness and feebleness of the priests and reviled them, saying, why do you delay? Why do you not immediately seize all of them who are with him? When he had said these things, he first jumped up and seized the brand from the altar. We're talking about Paul. And he began to strike with it. When the rest of the priests saw him, they did likewise. Many were in flight and some were falling by the sword. Some of them were consumed and many died. Remember, what did James give Paul? No blood, Paul. But what is Paul doing right here? Defiling the temple with what? Innocent blood. This goes against the community rule in the Dead Sea Scrolls. He completely defiled the temple. People believe this was the second time, if it wasn't for those Greeks. But we'll keep going. Much blood of those was shed. That enemy through James, we're talking about Paul, from the top of the stairs. And when he fell, he was as dead. So he did not strike him a second time. When they saw what happened to James, they came up and rescued him, for they were more numerous than them. So let's go back. Let's understand this. That enemy threw James from the top of the stairs, and when he fell as dead, so he did not strike him a second time. So what does that mean? Paul felt like he accomplished what? He felt like he accomplished killing James, the brother of Yeshua.
I got to jump in.
Bishop of the Jerusalem church.
Excuse
so
me,
he
brother.
didn't feel the need to strike him a second time. In his mind, he killed him, right? His anger has been somewhat assuaged. 171. When
can
they
I ask
saw
you a
what
question?
happened to James,
I don't know if you can hear me.
Go ahead.
I just want to quickly ask you a question. People are asking, I want to make sure this is the Ascent of James.
Yes.
That's the literature. And it is corroborating this what's said in the Pseudo-Clementine homilies.
Correct.
Okay,
well, wait a minute. I don't remember if this account is in the homilies, but it is in the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles.
No, he said it's called the recognitions.
Yes. This is the recognitions, and I'll show that. I'll show how they acknowledge.
I just wanted to make sure, so they'll know where to find the literature. So I keep going.
1.70. It's the same as the Ascent of James. 133 to 171. 1.70. Excuse me, 1.33 to 1.70. But this account will be in 1.69 to 1.71.
In the Ascent of James.
In the recognitions, correct? No. Yes, this Ascent of James is similar to the recognitions.
Perfect. Please continue. Yes. I just wanted to give them.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the questions. It says, when they saw what happened to James, they came up and rescued him from, although they were more numerous than them. Because of their fear of Elohim, they would rather endure killing than kill others. So they were more numerous in the factions, but they would rather endure killing than kill others, right? Because they weren't about violence and stuff like that. Contrary to what people would like to say that they were violent, they were not. Although they were greater and stronger than them, because of their fear of Elohim, they were seen as fewer. When evening came, the priest closed the temple, right? I remember talking about that in the prophecies. Therewith shall the doors be shut, but we'll just keep going. When he came to the house of James and prayed there, before dawn, we went down to Jericho, about 5,000 persons. Now, this is where the connection is with the Dead Sea sect of the Essenes, where they go to Jericho, which is a part of near the Dead Sea, right? Because many people had agreed that James, John, and the apostles were of the Essene sect, right? They were a specific order, but we'll keep going. It says about 5,000 persons. Now, if you remember in the gospel, in the book of Acts, it talks about that day 5,000 was saved, right? Remember that? In the book of Acts, as many received the Spirit, it was 5,000. And sure enough, you see the same number of 5,000 in the Ascent of James. Okay? We'll keep going. And it says, after 3 days, one of the brothers came and related to us what had happened. Thereafter, we were in the temple. Those priests who were with him were convinced that he should be as a priest. We're talking about, this is Paul, in all their plans, because they did not know that he was a fellow believer with us. Again, this is talking about Paul, that he had received letters from the high priest to go and do this and commit this act. So let's be clear. After he had made this assault on the apostles, on James, the brother, the bishop of the Jerusalem council, he wants to go finish the job and kill him and destroy him. That's where he has this so-called epiphany road to Damascus experience. As scholars say that he actually fell off his horse and was struck by his horse, and therefore had like this, euphoric, whatever it is, and he took that as an omen to not pursue them anymore. But these are, neither here nor there. We'll keep going. He told us, therefore, that hostile man had gone before the priests and asked Caiaphas, the high priest, to destroy all those who believe in Yeshua. Do you see that? He had gone to Damascus, taking letters from them so that the unbelievers would help him destroy those who believe. So he wanted to go finish it. Now he wanted to go there first because he thought that Peter had gone there. But remember, 2 Peter says, this is my brother, right? No, man, that's a long topic. We'll keep going. But after 30 days, he passed by us. So what does that mean? The apostles and party, the Ebionites, took a side turn to Jericho, right? Which was in the desert of the Dead Sea. Paul passed by them, not knowing that's where they went. He says he passed by us there in Jericho. 2 of our brothers in the night in that place, we had buried them, whose tombs were every year whitened, and the anger of many was suppressed, as they knew that the sons of our faith were worthy of the vine. Now I'm gonna ask people, and I'm gonna hold there, and I'll come back to the screen. Now there, the Ascent of James stops. We don't hear any more from James, and I would ask anybody, why is that? Because Paul, historically, we believe, killed James. This is something that people ain't ready for when he said, if you go look, Paul indirectly acknowledges this in 1 Timothy 1:13, but he claims the Pharisaic ideology. Well, I did it ignorantly in unbelief, because remember, they did not believe that you could be pardoned for sin, even willingly having sinned after becoming to the knowledge of something. If you go to 1 Timothy 1:13, he indirectly acknowledges this, that he was guilty of this, but he doesn't go into detail who it was. Who was before a blasphemer, a persecutor, and injurious, but I obtained mercy, but I did it ignorantly in unbelief. That was a Pharisaic ideology. They believed that you could only be forgiven if you did something in ignorance, not if you did something willingly. But contrary to that, Yeshua had acknowledged that basically to forgive your brother 770 times 7, which means even if you already knew of something, you could still be forgiven. Let's hold there. Now, when you go to Acts 26 to show proof this was Paul, and then we'll go back into the Nazarene Acts. If you go to Acts 26, okay, you go to Acts 26, he acknowledges that he did things contrary to Yeshua, the Nitzari. And then I'll go back and prove when he said Simon the magician that he was referring to Jesus, who they followed, right? So right here, we'll go to, this is Acts 26 and 9. Acts 26 and 9. I verily thought myself that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Yeshua, the Nitzari, which things I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints that I shut up in prison. We know this, having received authority from the chief. Didn't we just read that right? Have received authority from the chief priests when they were put to death. I gave my voice against them, and I punished them oft in every synagogue, right? And compelled them to blaspheme, and being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them unto strange cities. What city? Whereupon, as I went to Damascus with the authority and commission from the chief priests. This is where the story picks up about his epiphany on his road to Damascus, where the story reads differently on 3 different occasions. One, they hear the voice and they don't see him, and one, they see but don't hear the voice, and the other one, they all fall down. And from Acts 9, Acts 22, and Acts 26, right? If they say, but this is a book of Acts written by Luke, well, some will even argue against it if the accounts of Luke were authentic. But right here, when we go back to the Essene of James, what do we find out? That this hostile man did what? What did this hostile man do? Let me see if we can go back to it. This hostile man did what? He took letters from the chief priest right there. He should be as a priest in all their plans. They did not know that he was a fellow believer with us. He told us, therefore, that hostile man had gone before the priest and asked Caiaphas, the high priest, to destroy all those who believe in Yeshua. That's a one reference there. And this is another acknowledgement of this right here. When you go back to Acts 26, you see what I'm saying? In the connections of this being Paul that was responsible for the killing of James. The Essene of James ends after that. The Nazarene Acts makes it appear like he had broken legs and he had commanded Peter to go on and deal with this wretch named Simon Magus and was dispatched thereby. But let's hold there, right? Because I said I was going to prove that he was speaking about, when he was talking about Simon Magus, that he was talking about Christ, who we call the Anointed One, because he preached another Jesus, right? He preached another Jesus that many people may not be aware of. This is in the, let me see. I'll say Magus. I'll do it that way, right? That these scholars had acknowledged that when he's talking about this particular account, he's talking about Jesus. And this is going to be hard for people to accept, who we call, Yeshua, right? The brother of, okay, right here. Let me see if I can find it. So it's like, okay, fam, like, what are y'all going to do? What are we going to do about this? You see what I'm saying? Or are we going to get mad at me or just say, okay, he's just sharing it. I don't agree with it. Fine. You don't have to agree with it. But I'm doing my best to share with you guys to give clarity to the more detail of it, that when they were talking about when he called them Simon the magician, right? Let me see if this is it.
Right. They refer to him to Paul calls Christ Simon the magician, but don't they call him correct. Simon Magus as well?
That is correct. Right here. Now, do you see it right there? An enemy entered and accepted.
We don't see it. You have to present it every time. I'm sorry.
No worries. No worries. So right here, this is the Essene of James, right? This is the Essene of James. In the chapter 70, the source's narration of the debate continues just as James had convinced all his hearers and was about to present them. for baptism, an enemy entered and upset the plan, talking about Paul. He incited a riot and then attacked James and threw him from the top of the steps. The whole church escaped from the temple. They returned to the house of James and went to Jericho. Meanwhile, the enemy received authority from the high priest to go to Damascus to persecute the believers, but missed the church that was still in Jericho. Remember, we're talking about the Dead Sea. When we talk about the reference to the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls, we'll keep going. Who we note disjunctions after 171. We indicate that our source has reached its end. Remember what I said, the Essence of James ends after that, but we'll keep going. Although the form of the Petrie monologue continues, the Clementine romance continues. That's what I mean when I say the Nazarene Acts has him continuing on, following Simon Magus and going these debates. We'll keep going. The cast of characters also shifts to that of R111 through 26 and R2. Zacchaeus, Simon the Magician, Peter and Clement. On this evidence, we conclude right here that another source insofar as employed R1 concludes the end of 171. All right. So what are we talking about here? That people, the scholars were saying that basically Simon Magus he was referring to as Yeshua. And people are going to say, oh, well, that's this and that. I'm like, fam, I don't write this stuff, right? No, let me go back. I don't write it. You see what I'm saying? These are the scholars that say he was referring to Jesus. See what I'm saying? Let me see. Let me go down to it. So it's like they acknowledge that basically, how do you say it? All right, here we go. Again. All right, where are we? 154.
I'm just letting you know we cannot see your screen at all. You have to hit present.
Oh, shoot. Sorry for that. Thank you for that.
No, that's okay. I didn't want to keep interrupting you. I don't want to irritate you.
No. Please jump in. Let me know. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because this technical stuff. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And thank you for being here. The audience is. Do you mind? Look, nobody's going to debate you. I can make sure of it. But do you mind if people come in and ask questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
After I share this, let's open it up for discussion.
Sure, I'm going to drop the link. So, family, please.
I've given out a lot, and I expect for there to be disagreements or different questions. That's fine.
But we have a great audience.
Here,
they're not
right here. This is the Essence of James, again, as quoted by Epiphanius, just as the high priest. Let me see. This would be page 154, 153. Let me see. Let me hold on to this one. Okay, this would be on page 154. Okay, but this starts off at 153. Just as the high priest and the people were about to be baptized, someone enters the temple shouting protest. The man is described as homo kadem inimicus, a certain hostile man, and in the SHD, whatever, a certain man who was an enemy. The enemy evidently has heard about the debate and the success of James and has come at the crucial moment to disrupt James' efforts. The word of the enemy shout is given as 3 questions by the Latin and then the one in the Syriac, but the content is the same. He charges that the men of Israel are being too easily persuaded by those who are deceived by talking about the Latin, who go astray after the Syriac, a magician. This magician is not Simon, but read that for me.
This magician is not Simon, but Jesus.
Bing bong.
God dang.
So when he's over here calling them the apostles, y'all are following Simon the magician. His references in regards to who we call Jesus of Nazareth. That's why the historians say, who understand his history, they say that Paul preached another gospel and that he preached another Yeshua, contrary to the one that the apostles actually knew and walked with, right? So that's what I'm saying. I just wanted to show that reference of that and on. So other strata consistently portray Simon, not Jesus, as the magician who opposed the church when this is the Simon tradition and on. All right, and that's there. So I just want to prove that I believe this goes more into detail about these events. And so people can choose to disagree. I'm just sharing the information. Let's discuss it. Let's have an open dialogue. Yes. I do got to run.
I know.
How long have we been on? We're almost 2 hours.
Wow, you're going on almost an hour, just 6 minutes shy. I want to say this.
Thank you for honoring me. Thank you for bringing me on.
You know what? Again, you're doing me a favor and the HOK a favor. Vocab came in. He offered. He's a well-known Bible apologist. He's a New Testament believer and studier. So he came in and he gave. And I forgot to say, and he's a supporter. I'd say he's a very avid reader and subscriber to Pauline doctrine. I'm sorry, Vocab, if that's not accurate about you. I just think he really, a lot of Christians, he's a Christian. So a lot of Christians really are super putting Paul first. So he came in and he gave us one side, and you come in and give us the other side. Now, what I love about your information, Yermiyahu, you give a lot of sources. You're in the right place. Family, anybody, this brother's taken 2 hours of his time today. I think he was actually at doing something, and he came on. If you want to come in and ask him a couple of questions, that'd be great. There were a lot of questions in the chat. So let me see if I can go over them right now. Somebody had asked way back about, I think, the source that you first pulled. Did you pull up the Epiphanius source? I think that was it. Y'all can go back on the video. You gave me a great idea, though, Yermiyahu, to start doing putting the literature out in the chat with the time. With the how do you say it? Where you can find it in the books. So anyway, here somebody says, does it mention? Big O 581 says, does it mention that Paul was? Oh yes, that was a question. Someone was asking where in that ascent of James does it say Paul? I had said Saulus. Is that right? Saulus.
Great question. Great question. Okay, like I said, it indirectly alludes to him. But again, I'll show another source of the same exact narrative, right? Thank you for that. Great question. Okay. And I'll share my screen in a minute. I just want to pull it up. Okay. All right. I'll pull it up. All right. Let me share my screen. Thank you for that. All right.
No worries.
And people have a right to question that. That's fine. All right. So again, like I said, it indirectly speaks of it. There are connections that point to it, and on. All right. So so this book that I'm going to be sharing with you guys is called The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles. I'll go up to the top. Right there.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Y'all, I don't know if you were timed out. What for? We have the best mods. Nobody's timing anybody out for addressing the information. If they see some disrespect or perceive it, they may time you out because we try to be respectful to our guests. So I'm sorry if you got timed out of misunderstanding, and this is the toughest environment. However, we don't let our guests come in and get beaten up, especially if the brother comes in and said, I come in peace.
I come in peace.
Go ahead, brother.
Okay.
All right.
So this right here is this particular right here, the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, the recognitions of Clement. This is a detailed record of Clement having his discourses with the Ebionites, aka the apostles and party of the early first century, and his chronicles and records after that, after the passing of James, and what was going to go on with Peter and Simon Magus, of which we believe is really Paul of Tarsus, and there's many connections as well. The references was the Catholic Church covered it up. Paul made Simon Magus because he's their front runner, but that's another discussion. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, the recognitions of Clement, the preaching of Peter, the ascents of James. Now, do you guys see that? So I'm going to say, can somebody please put 1.33 through 1.70 in the chat?
And that is what
in reference to the Nazarene Acts.
1.33 to
1.33, and then put a hyphen 1.71. Excuse me, 1.71. All right, in reference to the Nazarene Acts, because basically what I'm saying is the Nazarene Acts and the ascents of James are basically the same, but the ascents of James just covers 1.33 to 1.71, while the Nazarene Acts goes through books like what 6, 7, or whatever it is. But so that's what I'm saying. So I understand the question. The ascents of James just covers a bracketed portion of the Nazarene Acts from 1.33 to 1.71, but it continues on. That's what we just read, that Clementine literature shows that Peter continues on, which is true. But in the ascents of James, see, because old boy thought it was sacrilegious where we said Paul killed James. And so look what he did. I'm out. I don't want to hear that. That's cognitive dissonance. I understand people are going to do that, right? Because this is upsetting to people, that this form of history, like I would ask anybody in the audience, why wasn't this covered in the so-called book of Acts? Why do we got to go over here and search this stuff? Are you going to get mad at me because the historians and the scholars know about this stuff and it's we that don't as a people, but we're mainly been subjugated by the Greco-Roman gospels and the Greco-Roman ideals of the law. When I'm showing people the Ebionite, I'm showing people the Southern Palestinian Messianism. I want to say this.
Right.
There were four forms of Messianism. there was Pauline, of which most of us know through a lot of his letters and even some of the book of Acts. There's Greco-Roman, which, blessed are the fruit of thy womb, Jesus, and the blood of Mary, right?
Hellenized.
And then, oh man. And then you have overseas, which is how the people all throughout the world view Christianity, might differ from the Roman Catholic Church and as well as Paul. And then what I'm showing you guys from the Ebionites is what we call Southern Palestinian Messianism. The Essenes, the Ebionites, the Nazarenes, Nazarites, they all knew of a messianic figure to come, as they wanted this messianic figure to rid them of these different foreign groups that they had warred with. They were expecting a messianic figure.
I got to jump in. I got to jump in. Thank you for your grace of letting me interrupt. But I got to jump in and interject.
Please.
Last night, Vocab, this is what I need you to touch on. He actually said that the Essenes were not messianic. I need you to talk about that.
We'll do that, but put that on a pause temporarily. We'll get to that, and we'll show that in the Dead Sea Scrolls that they acknowledged there was a Messiah of Israel to come. That they knew that, and they actually. It's a long discussion, but they knew a Messiah was to come. Basically, that would deliver them as they were hoping for. Because remember, they were doing almost 100 years of wars with the Romans. And they wanted their country to be rid of these Romans and stuff. We're talking bloodbaths that we just don't know about. The book of Acts doesn't cover it. So we talk about the Essenes, and there were different sects of the Essenes as well. They were more like the Zealot style, those of the Sicarii, which were a sect, right? And then there were those that were more ascetic, more peaceful, but we'll keep going. But definitely remind me, and I'll show the connection to the Dead Sea Scrolls, that they were expecting a Messiah.
And I got to jump in again to give some more, just to jump in with and expound. Remember, this is around the time when Rome was really persecuting the Jews in, as far as around, what is it, the 50, 60?
Yeah, somewhere, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would say around the 60s and on, yes. I would say it was about 100 years. I would say even before Yahshua, and that I would say, remember, it started around the time of the Maccabees. And it just continued all the way through, and so we're talking about 100 plus years of fighting and wars with the Romans. So they really wanted there to be a messianic figure. Like they really, really wanted these Romans, because remember, they were killing women, they were killing babies, butchering people, setting up pigs in the temple, the statue of Olympus and Zeus, setting up sports stadiums around Jerusalem, right? Having to bow down to Roman rulers. Again, I'm mixing in a little history here. What I'm saying is, why isn't this, if you guys could be, not you guys, but whoever it is could be upset at me, but we could ask the question, why isn't a lot of this history in depth about James and all this covered in the book of Acts? Why don't we know this stuff? Right. Somebody knew it back then. Luke knew it back then, as which he was a contemporary, but it's greatly omitted. It's gently touched upon. Let's go over here. Let's go over there. That's why I say history shows us the book of Acts is not the 100% most accurate authentic document. It does state some things because of the audiences that were there. They could not tell a false story because of, like, for example, the council, the Jerusalem council could not have been falsified because of, or to a certain extent, because there was many people in the audience that were there. I think if they wanted to, they could have, but it was a big event. So they would love to falsify that, but I see it as they couldn't. It was too difficult to write out. So that part they had to put in. But we come in Acts 15. Who is this James that Paul's got to talk to? Who is this James again in Acts 21? You don't know who it is. That's why I say we're going to get aggravated at what I'm sharing, or are you guys going to look at it yourselves in all sincerity? But right here, the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, the recognitions of Clement, the preaching of Peter, the ascents of James. So I want to be clear. The ascents of James is 1.33 to 1.71. It's covered within the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles. So with that, let's go to book 1. Let's go to book 1, chapter 70. Okay, let's go to book 1, chapter 70. And I'm going to show 1.70 where it'll say that, whatchamacallit man came in, right? Hostile man came in, and it'll say who it is.
Oh, yes, you went over that. Before you go, but I just want to ask you one more time. Could you repeat the actual author of the Ascent of James is?
The Ascent of James. The Ascent of James. We're believing it was Clement. Clement of Rome. that he was the one that exists. If you want to talk about the actual publication, the one that I shared was Robert E. Van Voorst.
Okay.
If you're talking about this actual book, this actual publication that showed the Syriac and the Latin side by side was Robert E. Van Voorst. But I'm in belief that the Essence of James was written by Clement, because Clement was told by James and Nazarene Acts to keep a record of these events and things like that. But this Nazarene Acts right here, if we're talking about this particular one, Jackson Snyder, Theodore Dornan, Chris Ploriday, you can get a PDF online if you don't have the money or whatever it is. This is a PDF that I'm sharing with you guys. Can you guys see my screen?
Let me go ahead and big screen that for you. Okay. There you go. All right. Thank you so much. You are really giving us a lot of information, whether people agree or not.
And I'm thankful.
Sources. One thing, you are in the right place, because we source up over here, and you are
I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for the opportunity. And I want to go here. Look at you. All right, now I want to highlight this, because one had asked, well, show me where it says Paul. All right, I'm gonna highlight this. All right, want to be clear. This is still the Essence of James, 1.73 to 1.71. L representing 50, X and X represents 10 and 10, which means 20. So right there, tumult raised by Shaul.
This is what he pulled last night. If I'm not mistaken.
So because of the cognitive dissonant wall that people have, they're naturally going to attack somebody, disagree with them, get angry, because this directly contradicts Paul's letters. This rips up churches, camps, ideology, theology, as why certain people, even if they hear it, would reject it. It's a natural thing for somebody to reject this, because now you're talking about my mama, now you're talking about my grandma, you're talking about my family, man. We love Paul, whatever it is. Nobody said you can't love Paul. Nobody said Paul's letters were not authentic. Paul's letters give us a little more history.
Thank you.
That's the beauty of it. Even though some of the things you have to say as far as religion and his stance on it, scholars and historians may disagree with, he does give a lot of history that opens us up to what was going on when he talked about remembering the poor, and I would not bless the poor with gifts.
Exactly.
So he's opening it up to his history by his own mouth. That he often, how do you say it, in a way tells on himself by writing all these letters that have been open to very much scrutiny and criticism over these last 2,000 years. So this is the same one I read in the Essence of James, 170, 1.70. And when matters were at that point, they should come and be immersed, one of our enemies. I'll highlight that, because Peter refers to him as an enemy. To those who try to use Second Peter is considered pseudographia.
Okay.
Yeah, because they say it was not written under the authority of James, because it was James that was the head bishop, not Peter. Moving on. Entering into the heckle with a few men and began to crying out, "Why you mean what mean you, O men of Israel? Why are you so easily hurried on? Why are you led headlong by most miserable men who are deceived by Simon the magician?" When I first heard this, I thought he was talking about James, but I did the history behind it. No, fam, he's talking about Jesus. Okay. While he was thus speaking and adding more to the same effect, while Jacob the Mevakar, this is James the Just. I want to be clear. Mevakar means chief bishop or overseer or examiner. It talks about this in the Dead Sea Scrolls, about the chief examiner and the stuff like that, right? And when it talks about the Zadokim, the Zadokites, when it talks about the pious ones, the righteous, that's actually what his name meant, James the Just or James the Righteous, Jacob Sadiq, but we'll keep going. And while Jacob Mevakar, or the bishop, was refuting him, he began to excite the people to raise a tumult, so that the people might not be able to hear what was said. Therefore, he began to drive all into confusion with shouting and to undo what he had been arranged with much labor. So he comes in undoing this water baptism stuff. And at the same time, to reproach the Kohanim or the priests and to enrage with them with revilings and abuse, and like a madman, incite everyone to murder, saying, What do you? Why do you hesitate, O sluggish and inert? Why do you not lay hands upon them and pull these fellows to pieces? When he had said this, seizing a brand from the altar, we had read this also in the Essence of James. Remember, that was in 1.70. Okay? Because old boy was like, man, he was blaspheming, whatever.
This is what he read last night. Shout out to Vocab. I hope you're listening.
And then he says, set the example of smiting. Then others also seeing him were carried away with like readiness, and into the tumult on either side of the beating and the beaten, much blood is shed. There's a confused flight in which the midst of that enemy, who's that enemy? We're talking about Rav Shaul, attacked Yaakov, threw him headlong. Okay, so we could disagree with the contents. That's one's personal. That's fine, but his history says this was an authentic, accurate depiction.
No,
Even it's in
right.
the Essence of James and it's in the Nazarene Acts. Threw him headlong from the top of the steps, and supposing him to be dead, he cared not to inflict further violence upon him. And again, it talks about how they went to Jericho. He passed on them, and he took the
Before you
letters.
move on to that chapter, Yirmiyahu.
This is 170 and 171.
Well, I got to ask you, because that your experience, there's a lot of pushback on, and Vocab as well. He says that is, it's fiction. It was written in the 4th century. Please reiterate the authenticity of it and let us know the time frame of when it was written.
So it seems your convenience that dismiss multiple books in the Bible that does not fit your narrative.
Don't read that right now, please. Please.
Well, I do kind of want to address.
Before you do that, I really want you to really. I'm not telling you what to do.
No, go ahead. Tell me what you got about the Messiah and the Dead Sea Scrolls.
No, the information that you just gave to the audience, including especially the Clementine writings.
Okay.
Vocab last night. And I'm saying Vocab because he's the Bible scholar he's a Christian apologist who brought the information out. He said he completely right away discounted and said, oh, no, that's 4th century. That's not authentic. I need you to really give us, drive it home on the dates and the authenticity of Clementine. How it is, at least there's significant information. I'm not saying hinge everything on those writings.
It's good.
But go ahead and talk on that, please.
Okay, it's good. And I appreciate that. Okay. Okay, so when we talk about right here, if you go to Epiphanius, again, going back to the Ebionites, and I thank you for that. Let's go to it. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
There is a connection that he
screen share. Don't forget to present if you're going to show us something.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay. Now, when you go back to, I want to say it was Epiphanius, he acknowledges that they had a book, among them was called the Travels of Peter. Let's go back. Okay, right here. And I'll highlight some of it. This is 30. This is the Ebionites, Epiphanius, 30, 15, and 1. Right there. That is what we refer to as the Clementine homilies. Talking about the Ebionites. I'm still in book 30 of the Ebionites of Epiphanius, but they use certain books as well. Supposedly the so-called Travels of Peter written by Clement. This is what we refer to as the Clementine homilies. Though they corrupt their contents while leaving a few genuine passages. Again, he's a heresiologist, so he's disagreeing with the contents, but he's acknowledging this particular material. And he says Clement himself convicts them in this very way of his journal epistles, which are read in the holy churches. Because his faith and speech are of a different character than their spirit's production of the name travels, he himself teaches celibacy, and they will not accept it. He extols Elijah, David, Samson, and all the prophets whom they bore, and on. In the travels, they have changed everything to suit themselves and slandered Peter in many ways. Remember, he's disagreeing with it, but he's acknowledging it. We'll keep moving on. Saying that he was baptized daily. It does say that in the Clementine homilies that Peter did baptize daily. For purification they are, and they abstain from, what does that say? Flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we had just read that that the Ebionites were vegetarian. Remember, what did James give the edict to overseas communities? Nothing strangled, no meat.
Nothing.
See what I'm saying? And they abstain from flesh and dressed meat as they do another dish made from meat, whatever, since the Ebion himself entirely abstained from these. When you ask one of them why they do not eat meat, having no explanation, again, he's talking about in his day, but yet there's more relevance to it more early in the 40s because he's speaking in reference of Clement. Clement was dealing with the early 1st century. Since it is a product of the congress and intercourse of bodies, we do not eat it. So now what are we talking about here? What they would say is another reason why they don't eat meat. Remember, what did James give to Paul to overseas communities? No fornication. Well, eating meat, animals are a product of what? Fornication. So they would look at that as being unrighteous. You see what I'm saying? Since it is a product of the congress of an intercourse of bodies, they do not eat it. That's why they ate fruits and vegetables and seed-bearing herbs and trees as given in Genesis 1:29. They look at Genesis, they look at the laws dealing with Genesis. Like I said, this is dealing with asceticism, a specific sect of the apostles and party that also had what? They had the travels of Peter right here, otherwise known as the Clementine homilies. And then since we're talking about the Clementine homilies, I want to show proof that Peter knew that there was going to be one out there misrepresenting his doctrine. All right, so let's go to the beginning. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for that. Okay, so now in this Clementine homilies, whom they carried, whom Epiphanes acknowledged in the early first century, dealing with Clement, right, that they carried what's called the travels of Peter. All right. As you guys see right here, this is going back to 1870, this particular publication. Okay. Ante-Nicene Library, translating of the writings of the fathers, the Clementine homilies, apostolic constitutions. Okay. And on. So the Clementine homilies. So now we go to, it says the misrepresenting right here, December 10th, 1931, the Institute of Medieval Studies. Okay. So right here, we'll go to the epistle of Peter to James. Let's go to that one. All right. I'll jump to where he says a misrepresentation right there. So let me zoom it in, because Peter had known that there was a man out there misrepresenting his doctrine. Who are we talking about? We are talking about Paul. In order, therefore, that the like may also happen to those among us, as the 70 give the books of my preachings to our brethren with like mystery of initiation. Remember, they went through a very different initiation to be admitted into the sect, a very strict ordination and understanding how the scriptures were to be used. These are my words. May indoctrinate those who wish to take part in teaching. For if it be not so done, our word of truth will be written to many opinions. So they had to be under a certain edict, a certain discipline under an elder, bishop, mevicar, examiner. It says, and this I know, not as being a prophet, but as already seeing that the beginning of this very evil, for some among the Gentiles, remember what did we show earlier, that Paul was what? Most likely a Greek, a Tarsian. So what do you see right here? For some among the Gentiles have rejected my legal preaching, attaching themselves to certain lawless and trifling preaching of the man who is my enemy. What do we read in the sense of James? It said an enemy came in and began to bring an uproar. What do we read? Who that was? I was Saul. And these things some have attempted while I'm still alive to transform my words by certain various interpretations in order to the dissolution of the law, as though I myself were of such a mind, but did not freely proclaim it, which Most High forbid. For such thing were to act in opposition to the law of Elohim, which was spoken by Moshe, and was borne witness to by our Adonai in respect of its internal continuance. For thus he spoke, the heavens and earth shall pass away, but one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law. And this he has said, that all things might come to pass. But these men, professing I know not how to know my mind, undertake to explain my words, which they have heard of me more intelligently than I who spoke them, telling of their catechumens that this is my meaning, which I indeed never thought of. But if while I am still alive, they dare to misrepresent me, how much more will those who come after me dare to do so? So that's why I say he was aware of that Paul, in certain respects, was emulating some aspect of his ministry, but he would misconstrue it and go over here. So some of the things being stated that you see, you'll see Peter describing certain things of Simon Magus, but then you'll hear Paul quoting them some regards in his letter. So we kind of question the connection there between Simon Magus and a wretch whom we call a wretch Simon Magus compared to those we call Paul. Some scholars believe Simon Magus is really Paul, but he's veiled because the Catholic Church has to protect him because he's their front runner.
Right. And that's the new, and you know what, first of all, we're going over 2 hours, and we're in 2 hours and almost 20 minutes. This information is so, it's very important to people like me and those out there who are studying and finding out more. But for those, and this isn't a diss or condescending, for those who are resigned to, this is my faith, this is it, my mom did it, their mom did it, you do whatever you need to do as far as your path. However, if we're talking about gospel of Christ, if we're talking about apostles of Christ and you want to get in scholarly, you got to start examining all the literature. So thank you so much. Nobody came in. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that. And I agree with you. And thank you for that. I completely agree with that. I want to share there were three Aramaic originals that predated the Greek text. Sister Nepal, when you said bringing all the material, this is alluding to that. There was the Gospel of the Nazarenes, the Gospel of the Ebionites, and the Gospel according to the Hebrews, not according to the Greeks, according to the Hebrews. That was written in Aramaic. That many people may not know of, that was in existence pre-Nicaea Council, that was written out because it dealt with asceticism, freedom from slavery, sharing, and vegetarianism, which Greece and Rome did not want to deal with. But so if you will allow me to share my screen, I'll share with you guys this particular literature that was in existence. Now, this one here deals with the critical analysis of the gospel according to the Hebrews. Okay,
I'm glad you're bringing this up, because before you do, I had another discussion with a brother calling himself the Holy Spirit, and I used this information, and the early church fathers used the gospel of the Hebrews. It wasn't as if it was
correct.
So definitely.
Thank you for that. And that's solid. So right here, this is called the gospel according to the Hebrews, fam. I don't know if it'll show it on the front, page 18 of 212.
We can see it. It's just a little small if you want to blow it up.
Okay, let me zoom it. Thank you for that. Let me zoom it. All right. Ooh, snap. All right. So this is I'm gonna try to see if I can zoom out a little bit. All right. All right. So this is the gospel according to the Hebrews. Okay. All right. Can you see it?
Yes, we see it. Great.
Now, this is where we would ask, why was this not a part of scholarly academia of the mainstream? Why do we got to search for it? But nevertheless, we'll keep going. The gospel according to the Hebrews is the name of a gospel of which only some 30 known fragments have come down to our day. It is my object to gather and examine the statements and opinions of ancient writers about this lost gospel, to arrange, translate, and illustrate its fragments. Lastly, to analyze internal evidence presented by the fragments and comparing it with external evidence to see whether it enables us to shape any like hypothesis as to the character and origin of the work to which they belong. So again, now here is a scholar, R.I.S.E, born and educated in Asia about 120 to 40, a pupil of Polycarp, and Polycarp studied under who we call John the Immense or John the Baptist.
Yes,
R.I.S.E, who was in 120 to 40 AD, acknowledges the first extant writer who refers to the gospel according to the Hebrews. To make his reference intelligible, it is needful to first to say that the early church believed Matthew to have written this gospel. What does that say? That says Greek, don't it? Huh?
Yes.
Remember what I said? Like, why is it they're speaking Aramaic, but the gospels we have today are all Greek? This is what we're talking about. They came in, reformed it, and gave us the edited stuff. The scholars say this was the original, as why most likely it's in fragments. But right here, the real Hebrew had long been dead speech, but the name was commonly given to the Syro-Chaldaic Aramaic. It is now generally termed. All right?
Is that Syri, that when you say Syro-Chaldaic, is that also
Aramaic? Aramaic is a dialect of Syriac.
The Syriac, yes, that's what I wanted to know. Got it.
That is
and
Aramaic.
That is a valid. That's another thing the guy was saying. Oh, that's a pagan. People need to do their research. That is Aramaic, right?
Basically, it is. It was the language of Abraham. Abraham was a Aramaic speaker. He spoke Aramaic. He was Syriac. It says, that he came from Ur the Chaldees. So we got to understand historically that it is a derivation, because remember the root-based words, Aramaic, Arabic, Hebrew, they come from like the same base. They read from right to left and on. I do have some Aramaic, and we'll not get into that now, but I do have some Aramaic references.
I got to bring you back.
Okay, so that is Aramaic. Papias, who can scarcely have written later and may have written a good deal earlier than 140 AD, says that Matthew composed the oracles in Greek. You see that? That had to be Greek, right? In the Hebrew speech, and each interpreted them as he was able. So now we're dealing with Papias, another relative of that era, and on. Irenaeus, then writing about 190 to 90 AD, says of the Ebionites, Irenaeus, then writing about 180 to 90 AD, says of the Ebionites, this is early first century, a Palestinian sect, what did I say, Southern Palestinian Messianism, that they use the gospel only which is according to Matthew, which is according to the Hebrews, not Shem Tab, Gospel of Matthew, not that one. We're talking about the gospel, the gospel according to the Hebrews, which later was termed according to Matthew. We shall hereafter see that the gospel of the Ebionites, what does that say? Was the gospel according to the Hebrews. That it was in Aramaic. was attributed to Matthew and was in existence in the time when Irenaeus wrote. In the second place, Irenaeus again speaks of the Ebionites as using that gospel only which is according to Matthew. It is quite clear, therefore, that he believed. All right, right here. His day will be considered when we come to the evidence of Eusebius. We're dealing with scholarly dissertation. As what the name of this publication asserts is that this is dealing with a very critical analysis of the gospel according to the Hebrews. So right here, the gospel according to the Hebrews to be of Matthean authorship. And as he nowhere says that Matthew wrote 2 gospels, on the other hand, expressly limits the number of genuine gospels to 4, we must have regarded it as the one work with the present Matthew, Clement of Alexandria. So what are we dealing with? We're dealing with different scholarly, how do you say it? Fathers that were back then who acknowledged the existence of the gospel of the Hebrews. Clement of Alexandria writes, as Matthias in the traditions exhorting us all says, marvel at what is before thee, supposing it's the first step to ulterior knowledge, just as the gospel according to the Hebrews as is written. Clement of Alexandria is acknowledging gospel according to the Hebrews. He that has marveled shall reign, and he that has reigned shall rest. A formula that is written as the writer of Supernatural Religion, 4th edition, page 236, generally understood to indicate a quotation from Holy Scripture. Oregon, after saying that the Spirit also had being through the word, even if certain words seem to draw us to the opposite conclusion, goes on thus, but if anyone admits the gospel according to the Hebrews, where the Savior himself says, just now my mother, the Holy Spirit took me by one of my hairs and bore upon the mountain, the holy Tabor. He will raise a further doubt how the Holy Spirit, because remember, the Holy Spirit was considered as a feminine. Right?
Thank you.
Like Ruach Hakma and things like that in Isaiah 11 and on. It had like a feminine rendering according to the Hebrew, but we'll keep going. The different spirits in Isaiah 11, 1-3 were considered feminine, but the Father was considered masculine. I don't know if people know this. Earth is feminine in Hebrew and heavens is masculine. Ain't that something?
Oh my God, brother, you are the fire breather over here. You're bringing the
grace
truth.
of Elohim.
Praise the Most High. Yes, thank you.
All praises. Fam, I listen to this stuff while I'm driving. I got all these audio books, so I'm bubbling over here. Thank you for that. Okay.
Thank
you. So it says he will raise a further doubt how the Holy Spirit, thank you, that he had been through the word can be the mother of Yahshua. But these words in this difficulty, it is not hard to interpret. For if he does the will of the Father in heaven, is an example of his brother, and on. So it is evident so far as Irenaeus knew that the Ebionite gospel was not a corrupted Matthew. You see what I'm saying? So it says right here, at the same time, we cannot tell that Irenaeus or those from whom he drew his information knew anything more of the Ebionite gospel than that the Ebionites themselves affirmed to be the gospel according to Matthew. What does that say? Died about 213 to 18 AD. You see that right there? Wrote 226 to 54 AD. Who are we dealing with again? I believe we're talking about Oregon. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong. Let me see. Who is that talking about? I believe it's talking about Oregon. So we're dealing with editors, scholarly dissertation. We're taking the emotions out. Now we're getting close to the 3rd century. Eusebius ecclesiastical history, which would be, you can find in the Loeb Classical Library or the Harvard edition. It's your choice. Or I think it might even have it as Scholar Select. Eusebius ecclesiastical history in 325 mentions first the recognized books of the renewed covenant in his day that they agreed with, right? Then those which were disputed but recognized by most people. And lastly, those that were spurious. He does do that. He says which ones he acknowledged, which ones were disputed, which ones were just considered altogether abominable, right? He goes on as follows. And nowadays some have reckoned among these the gospel according to the Hebrews, which they of the Hebrews have received the messianic or the Christ love beyond any other. This implies that this gospel was accepted textbook of the Hebrew Christians in general, that its genuineness had only lately been questioned, that only a minority counted as spurious. In C27 of the same book, speaking of the division of the Ebionites, which did not reject the divinity of Yahshua, he says that using that gospel alone, which he calls according to the Hebrews, they took small account of the rest. From the context, it looks as if he was borrowing from and explaining or correcting Irenaeus, Theophania, and on. So we're showing at least the history of it. Papias, Clement of Alexandria, Clement of Rome, right? And on. Now when we get to the beginning of the gospel of the Ebionites, because this is only showing the fragments. I want to be clear. All right. That the Ebionite gospel, the Nazarene gospel, and the gospel according to the Hebrews are basically all parallels, right? They all support each other. We're dealing with narratives of the, of the history dealing with Yahshua and things like that. This is according to their account of Southern Palestinian Messianism, not the letters of Paul, not the Greek text. You guys see what we're saying? we're going more closer to the narrative that they tried to write out that many of us may not know. Yeah, it's fragmented now, but it was in existence in their day. So just give me a minute. I want to show, like, if you look at the Greek Gospels starts off in the first chapter. It talks about the virgin birth and things like that. The Gospel of the Ebionites and the Nazarenes pick up where the Matthew's Gospel is chapter 3. They don't even go into the virgin birth. They don't even go into the genealogies and things like that. The Matthean genealogy starts off with, I think the Matthean genealogy goes through Nathan, and I think the other one goes through
Levi.
Yeah,
You're talking about
and
Mary?
the way they come down. But remember, why are they using the paternal genealogies if he's just a son of the father? Why would they use that as a birthright genealogy if at the end he's just the father of the Most High, son of the Most High? So this is going to be considered to some people to be sacrilegious because of the impressioning upon it. But the Ebionites say he was just a man. He was born of a natural conception between Joseph and Mary. We could go into Isaiah when they say, well, it says a virgin. But then you go into that Hebrew speech. They use two different words for virgin, which means maid. Another one means a woman who has not been, woman who has not been married compared to a woman who has not had intercourse. And on the Gospel of the Nazarene shows Joseph goes in unto Mary and then she conceives. And on. So that's what I'm saying. To some people, it's going to be considered sacrilegious because of the impression upon us by the Roman Catholic Church. But I want to go into where they start off at the beginning, right here. All right.
Mm-hmm. And we're still in the Gospel of the Hebrews. We're still in
correct.
Okay.
So we see right here. Now, do we see right there? Now, I want to be clear where Matthew of the Greek text starts off, where Matthew of the Greek text is chapter 3, the Ebionite gospel, that's their chapter 1. You guys get that? They don't even go into a virgin birth. They don't deal with the angel Gabriel and out of Egypt and all of those stuff. They start right off. If you go look at it, I ask anybody go look at Matthew, the Greek gospel, and go look at Matthew chapter 3. This is where it picks up. This would be the Ebionite or Nazarene, or according to the Hebrew gospel, chapter 1. There was a certain man by name, Yeshua, and he was of about 30 years who chose us out. Do you guys see that, right? You guys see how the narrative just completely jumps over. That's what Epiphanes was saying in his book. Well, they've omitted the genealogies because they say he was of a natural parentage and of a natural birth. That's why they don't even go into it. You see what I'm saying? And then it says, who chose us out? And when they come to Capernaum, get into the house of Simon, whose surname Peter, opened his mouth and said, pass my leg of Tiberius. I chose you out, James, John, and Zebedee. And this is some of the critical analysis of it. And Simon and Andrew, Thaddeus, and Simon, Judas, and Iscariot, and thee, Matthew, I saw sitting, and thee, Matthew, sitting at the receipt of custom I called, and you did follow me. I, therefore, will be my 12 apostles for testimony of Yahshua. Oh, again, there's a lot of critical testimonial work. Now, if you look right here on the left, it'll say Nazarene. Do you see that? That's talking about the Nazarene gospel. They're saying if you reference that Matthew 2:5, according to the Nazarene gospel, that's where they have that rendering. The Nazarene gospel, according to Matthew 2:5, the Nazarene gospel out of Matthew 2:15. If you guys have the gospel of the Nazarenes that they acknowledge was in existence, they carried it 3. I tell people they did not have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's why I keep telling people in their day earlier on, they didn't have the letters of Paul like that. You know what I mean? They didn't have Revelation. They didn't have 1st, 2nd John. I'm telling people they only carried the gospel of the Ebionites, according to the Hebrews, and the gospel of the Nazarenes. We're talking about the actual record of the events that occurred dealing with Yahshua all the way on and through. So anyways, Bethlehem of Judah, right? Now, in the Greek text, it'll say Nazareth. There's no Nazareth in the Old Testament. Now, that's a whole nother discussion as to why we believe they wrote that out. Out of Egypt I have called my son, that he shall be called a Nazarene. That's according to 2:23. Nazarene gospel agree with the Hebrew, seeing that the 2 instances give occur in the canonical Matthew and on, okay? So it's showing the rendering of it. And in those days, John began. You see that? They don't even go into the virgin birth, baptizing the baptism of repentance of the Jordan River. And there came out unto him Pharisees were baptized in all Jerusalem. And John had a camel's hair and a leathern girdle about his loins. And his food was, now do you see that? In the Greek gospel, it'll say locust. But look what the Ebionite gospel said, because they didn't believe in eating anything that had died. It says, and his food was wild what? Wild honey thereof. And the cake was of manna like a cake made with oil dipped with honey. People believe the locust came in because they said it was of the carob tree, which is called the honey locust. that they say the translators flipped backwards and said locusts and wild honey. They did not believe in eating anything that caused the suffering and dying of any. You see what I'm saying?
Is that the Nazarite part of the Nazarite vow? You don't eat anything that's killed?
Correct.
Now,
correct.
I do want to ask you, I know you've been going for a minute.
No, go ahead.
I wanted you to address this brother's question. I think this is a brother. Thank you to the sisters, especially, and the brothers, of course, the sisters who are learning from this brother and getting information. So I want to ask you, we got to bring you back, because when you go into the diet, that's a big topic, and you have a lot of research on it. Despite what I or anyone else, how we feel about it, I want you to come back and talk about that again, without any type of like now, not a lot of pushback, but so many good questions were in the chat. I wish I could have gotten. You were flowing, but can you answer this question about the blind? This might be a rabbit hole. Blind Paul, I think that's what he means. Blind Paul, and then the dandamark. I don't know what the dandamark is. Is that something about the scales on his eyes? I don't know. But I think that he's speaking about the blind Paul. I know you're smirking.
Okay. So if we go into this, it'll turn into something else. But I want to respond. Though. I'm gonna get to that, but I want to respond to what old boy was saying. That okay. So great.
Oh, he's saying no, blind punctuation marks. See, I don't know anything about.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I don't either.
But so I don't know. But I wanted to go on because I wanted to clear this up in a certain regard that what did he say? This is some of the dumbest shit I've heard. Animals breed due to nature. If they didn't, what the F are we going to do? Genesis 1:29 was the ultimate diet that the Most High gave, which is of the 10 utterances. I'm gonna write it out. I don't know how I would, respond to him. I'll say at Dr. Shalom, because I want to answer people. I want them to see that I'm not just trying to just share stuff and not be accountable or be willing to go into some of these discussions. At Shalomo, okay, Sands. Like I said, he doesn't gotta agree with the information, but I just shared it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh, this is dumb. That's fine, but I'm just sharing you how they looked at the law. Genesis 1 verses 29 through 31. They were vegetarians. They believed that the original law, pale the foes do the house of consciousness. Oh, okay. But so if you go look at Genesis 1:29, that's where they say anything that aligns with Genesis, they would say is real law. So there were 10 utterances in Genesis 1, the heavens, the earth, and the Most High said, the Most High said, the Most High said. One of the 10th utterances was man was supposed to eat from the seed-bearing herbs and trees. That was the 10th utterance. Remember, 10 plagues, 10 commandments, 10 utterances from Genesis 1:3 to Genesis 1:29. So what they're saying is if they eradicate the Levitical priesthood, which is what Yahshua did, and remember even John said, I must decrease. What was John? He was a Levite, right? So he said, I must decrease. And what did Yahshua do? He said, but from the beginning it was not so. Yahshua in his ordination is taking us back to the beginning. What we consider to be the original Torah when the Most High had said, I don't know if he said it is finished, but thus the heavens and the earth were created. That this is what the Most High originally established for man and woman, one man, one woman, and on. No flesh meat. Animals weren't supposed to be killing humans. Humans were supposed to be killing animals. Man was supposed to be killing man, and on, right? We weren't supposed to be shedding the blood of any particular creature. We were supposed to be eating seed-bearing herbs and trees. So what they saw was an unrighteous diet is eating animals, which are the product of carnal relations and fornication. That's what I'm saying. It's a different ascetic set of principles that is outside of the mainstream of Pauline Christianity, Roman Catholicism, and overseas. We're going more into what I'm saying, Southern Palestinian Messianism. That is not being properly shown and told, because when you try to explain to people, they didn't accept Paul, and there's many reasons why. Paul believed in blood atonement. The apostles and the Ebionites did not. Paul believed
we got to bring you back on this.
Paul believed in making money off the gospel. The apostles did not. Paul believed that Jesus was God in the flesh, and on. What the Ebionites say was that Yahshua became his son when he was baptized and when the Spirit entered into him. And then that's when they say he got his downloads. And that's when he says, this day have I begotten thee. And so the secularist belief differs between the Pauline Christian corpus and those of the Ebionite sect, which is what I was alluding to. And I'll share this and then we can roll out. And I thank you for letting me on.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a lot. It touches on a lot. It does. And it's not to be upsetting anybody or tell anybody what to believe. We're sharing people a sect, right, that varies greatly from Pauline Christianity. So when we
this is separate from the information that we were initially addressing. I want to bring you back to do a whole thing on your because you followed this. You followed the laws of the Essenes, and you are. I do
believe it. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And so I do want to. I think he's talking about maybe the Cairo. I don't know what the P.
Cairo oh, okay.
Yeah, the sign of Christianity.
But right here, he says, if you go look at this, and thank you for that. If you go look at this, according to the gospel, according to the Hebrews, this exact phraseology is in Psalms 2:7, in Hebrews 1:5, Hebrews 5:5. I'm doing my best to show the variances between Paul and the sect of the Ebionites. The way that they said that Jesus, Yahshua, was an ordinary man when he began to be indwelt by the Holy Spirit, that's when he began to be his son. What they're saying is Christ is the anointing that entered into Jesus at the baptism. And they're saying it left him. That's why he said, Father, Father, why hast thou forsaken me? This is how the Ebionites saw Yahshua. You see what I'm saying? That's why they didn't go into the virgin birth. It's very much directly relative to the various interpretations that Paul sees as the law and Yahshua. That's why they say he preached another Yahshua. But if you see right here, and a voice out of heaven saying, you are my beloved son, in thee I'm well pleased. And again, I have this day begotten thee. So, and I'll come out and I'll turn it back. And I thank you for that. But what I want to say is this. To be clear. What I want to say this to be clear, okay? If you go look at Hebrews 1:5, okay? I'm just showing a variance. Hebrews 1:5, and then look at Hebrews 5:5. They acknowledge that this event happened, but you don't see it anywhere in the Greek text other than the gospel of the Ebionites, the gospel according to the Hebrews, and the gospel of the Nazarenes. Go look at Psalms 2:7. You don't see this phraseology. You don't see this phraseology anywhere in the Greek text. This day have I begotten thee. You only see it in the Nazarene gospel, the Ebionite gospel, and the gospel according to the Hebrews. You don't see it in the Greek text. Why? This messes up Roman Catholicism theology. It messes up Trinitarian dogma, that there's one Elohim. So that's what I'm saying. I don't want to go too much off into it, but I'm just showing the variances between the Ebionites, the Essenes, the Sadducees that didn't believe in resurrection of the dead. Hemorrhoid Baptists believe in washing and ablutions. The Essenes believed in being doers of the law, Osei HaTorah. Pharisees believed in keeping the whole law. If you mess up one, you're done. So that's why I said there were 7 sects among the Yehudim. And I'm just sharing people the Judean sect, the actual historical apostles, which we know today to be considered by heresiologists of the 3rd and 4th century as Ebionites, which is basically the apostles in party. Even their family members all the way up into the 3rd and 4th century, Eusebius had acknowledged were descendants of basically Yahshua and the families of Jesus and stuff like that. They were not allowed into the Nicene councils to help reform the so-called Catholic religion. They were kept out. So that's what we're going into. So anyways.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's false beliefs. Okay. So anyway, so grace and peace. But I come in peace, brother Malachi Maccabee, peace and love to you in your home, even though you come attacking me. And I mean that sincerely. Peace and love to your home. Whatever brothers disagree, peace and love to your home. Man, I'm here out of peace. I'm here completely unorthodox. I ain't telling nobody what to believe, what you got to do. I'm just sharing the history, just giving out the information. You be the judge. You go and do it yourself. And that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me, Sister Nepal. You know, as you guys say, peace of black power, brother Sadnetta, man, grace and mercy. I know we all have differing beliefs, but the one thing that we need, I believe more than anything, is to basically understand, love the Creator, love your neighbor as yourself. Show love and respect.
And you know what? Really I love your philosophy. You are very, you know what? I do know that about you over the years. I've come at your neck a few times, and you know you are very peaceful, but not.
Hey,
in a
come at my neck.
disrespectful way.
It's good. It's
It
good.
was on
Ask
the
the questions.
on the veganism.
I don't want to sound prideful by saying bring all the smoke, but because I don't like that phraseology, I think that's adversarial. That's my opinion.
Right.
I believe it's more so. Let's have a discussion. Like I look at what we're doing now as like metaphorically sitting down at a coffee shop.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. We're just sitting down having, and there's this other people in the audience, and I'm just sharing with you what I've seen historically and what has happened contrary to the mainstream beliefs. I'm not trying to come on here telling people this is what you got to believe, this is what you got to do. Like, for example, I believe in wearing all white, nothing that dyed, made from flax, cotton, or linen, not wearing anything that had to do with any.
No mixed, right? No mixed. Okay,
so that's what I'm saying. I do follow it, and I do have a group on Facebook called Essene Nazarite Brotherhood Sisterhood, and we go into these discussions and we talk about these things daily. We want people to disagree. We want people to have their own beliefs. We want people to disagree. We want people to have their beliefs, but we just want to share people the direct history, and we hope and pray that you guys get the opportunity to study it for yourselves. That's all I want. Study for yourselves. Sister Nepal, grace and peace. May the Most High bless
you are one of the darkest minds of the light, meaning you go deep, 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 and then you bring out the light. I did really quickly, because you know what I'm doing over here. You don't have to address it, but I mean, you don't have to go deep, but the sister, she's one of the HOK family. She says, it sounds like the Bible is a mix of historical events.
That's another topic.
Numerology, zodiac, and she's quoting Dr. Cesar F.
This I don't want to say it because I don't want to seem like I'm being sacrilegious, but she does unfortunately have a point in certain regards of biblical literature. Now, I want to be clear. When we talk about the Bible, I'm talking from the stance of the way the Europeans put it together, what we refer to as Helios Biblios. In those days, they had scrolls, okay? Right. So when we talk about Bible, okay, we have to be specific. We're talking about Helios Biblios of what the Europeans and Romans put together. And they told this to our people, here, you guys believe this and that only. What we're sharing is the other stuff that they don't want us to get involved in or nor study. And unfortunately, there is mixed in some of that stuff. Unfortunately.
Okay. Well, you say unfortunately.
That's why I say it's another topic with what has been infused, because that's why I say it's very simple.
And but you do get into that.
On, but the Most High is very simple, fam. What we believe is the original laws go back to Genesis, which can be clearly seen in nature. The sun, the moon, the stars, everything that can be proven, the waters, the way the seasons change. Man and man cannot create children, only man and women. Things that can be proven. Things are very simple. Basically, they don't, like the Ebionites did not believe some aspects of the books of the prophets because of the anthropomorphic expressions of the creator, when specifically to say in other regards, no man can see me and live. But then over here, you see anthropomorphic expressions, meaning the creator in the likeness of a man sitting on a throne. But over here, you'll see another expression that the Most High is spirit and cannot be seen in the flesh and on. But then you'll see a contradiction that'll say they saw him and under his feet were glass. And then you'll see anthropomorphic expressions of the creator dealing with demigod-like creatures, of winged creatures in some of the prophecies. Is why the Ebionites said, in order for it to be considered law, and then I'll let you go and I'll roll it back. It must align with Genesis. From Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is what the Ebionites believe. The original law is in Genesis 1 and 2. And whatever is to be consistent with being the foundation of the creator, it has to align with Genesis, what he had put in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. So if anything later down the road contradicts, they would consider it as non-authoritative and not accurate nor under. That's why people say God of the Bible. You heard that people say, oh, the God of the Bible killed 1 million people, but Satan ain't killed nobody. I've heard people say that.
That's what my husband says.
I've heard people say that, like, man, that's tough, because we're talking about the collection of the text that they put together. But again, when we go into creation, we don't see wars. We don't see multiple wives in Genesis 1 and 2. We don't see all of these different gods. We don't see this horrible, hostile creation. We see a place of pure paradise and pure Zen, right? Unity between man and animals. We're talking about Genesis. So that's why I say it's a variant view of the sect that stands outside of the mainstream that people are just not going to accept right away, even though it's been there the whole time. So can I ask another question? Phase Dre Theo? Is that
the brother who asked about the P, which we couldn't, I didn't know if it was
I'm not sure what that meant.
But yeah, so the question is explain the difference between the oral tradition. But I did want to, I have another family member. We'll get to that real quick. The brother has to go, but I do want to go to Black Lion. Can you quickly talk to us about what he's referring to? Look up Rufinus, and I think he's saying Aquila.
Yeah.
Brother.
Yeah. I believe this might have been closer to the 70 or some of the disciples of the apostles, like around the 60s and stuff like that. It does talk about Aquila. I don't remember Rufinus specifically, but many people may not know Aquila is who wrote the Targum Onkelos. That's where the root base word Aquila, Onkelos. Okay, and mind you, it's an Aramaic. It's an Aramaic version.
Can you read Aramaic?
No, but I look at the renderings of it. I study it contrary to the Masoretic base. Masoretic Hebrew in the 7th to the 10th century versus the Aramaic that goes back to the 1st century. Onkelos, basically Aquila, you have Samachin and things like that. These were disciples and things like that. According to what I've studied, these were disciples, valid and substantiated. They are quoted in the some of the 70 are quoted, I believe, in the Clementines. I believe they're quoted in the Clementines.
Wow.
And possibly Rufinus as well, and Aquila.
You are such a plethora of information. The brother Drathos said, explain the difference between oral tradition. Oh, wow. That goes deep, bro. And oralism. Maybe you could just surface, because you know what? We appreciate you. I got to bring you back.
No, it's good. It's good. Okay, thank you for that. Okay.
Bring you back. No, I'm trying to get you to just commit on live.
We'll see. I'm not sure yet. Most High willing. I can't say for certain, but I would love to come back.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
However, oral law goes way before written law. That's the truth. When we talk about oral law, we talk about the 10 utterances from Genesis 1. Most High said, the Most High said, the Most High said. That was oral. That was what we call debar. That was vibration, speech, right? That we could clearly see the 10 utterances throughout all creation. That was oral. That superimposes anything written by man. That's why I say this is a great discussion. Because if you go look, like I said, go look at Genesis 1:3 through 1:29. The Most High said, the Most High said, the Most High said, the Most High said. And the last one was seed-bearing herbs and trees. That was oral before anything was written. Thousands of, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, years later, then came the writings and things like that. And so, like I said, what we say is this: edited the Essene of James, putting his own spin on it. I would ask anybody to prove it. That's a great assertion. I'd entertain it, fam.
Yeah, he's not a troll. He's really actually.
No. I'm saying I'd entertain it. We need more information. Show it. I would love to see that. That Rufinus edited the Essene of James along with other biblical texts, putting his own spin on it. But what I'm saying is, even if that was the case, the Essene of James still aligns with the Clementines, right? It aligns with the Essene of James. The Nazarene Act still aligns with the. Even if that's the case, it still aligns, though, between the Nazarene Acts, the Essene of James, and the Clementine literature. So when we talk about comparing testimonial witnesses, they all align. So I would ask anybody, from a scholarly / historical perspective, prove that. I would love to see those sources. And this is what I do in some of these groups when we have these discussions. We go into making proofs. We discuss all of this stuff.
Yeah,
with love and respect, of course. But thank you again.
On Facebook, this is like I know the brother's super humble. I believe that has something to do with his belief system. I'm talking about
how I was raised. My mom, I'm a Midwestern boy.
I seen you get a little spicy on Facebook though.
I'm from Kansas City. My mother, I'm a 70s baby, so we was raised with a little different than these 90s and millennials.
Yes,
but on top of the belief system, it does make a lot more sense. But I would like expanding on the oralism and the blind P. I would love to hear about it. Like I said, I entertain and be willing to have any discussions about some of these things in reference to.
I would too. This is a good piece of information, and it's going to help me.
Niambi, grace and peace. Dratho, many others. Even if you disagree, peace and love.
Yes, everybody out there, thank you so much. You were so great. Even though some people were a little bit hurt, you know, they got took it personally, but they still were. Overall, it was a great audience. But we have a wonderful guest. Thank you so much. We really appreciate teachers. I know you don't call yourself a teacher, but you taught us. Teachers, sharers of information like yourself. Thank you so much for joining us. This brother is known as Ebionite Essene. Go ahead and let people know exactly where to find you on Facebook.
Ebionite Essene Nazareth. I do have a Facebook page, and we do have a group where we go into discussing these discussions and things like that. It is a great opportunity to regather. I believe one of our biggest problems is being under the European religious system on top of many others, but that's definitely one of them. Roman Catholicism has done our people the greatest injustice. It is one of the greatest tyrannical religious systems out there that has existed for like 2,000 plus years, that nobody's allowed to question, or they're considered a heretic. Well, I would love being a heretic of the Roman Catholic Church. I don't mind that. But their ideas and views go deeply into Egyptian. When we talk about Rome and the Catholic Church, it goes deeply into Babylon, Semiramis. If we go into that and all, that's why I say we got to get away from the European-based system that has done us no justice. Religion itself, I agree, that has done us absolutely no justice, but has imposed upon us religious tyranny, if anything, where we're not allowed to defend ourselves. We're not allowed to read anything outside of that, because supposed Revelation, it says, you know, any man adds to the books and this and that, when that was made in the 90s, but there were other books that were out before that. That's what I'm saying. This is a long discussion of discussions of religious tyranny imposed on us by the West and Europe and Rome. I think it's time for us as a people to wake up, take off the emotions, you know, be humble, look at the facts. I want to say this. It upset me too when I realized how much they had suppressed and how much they didn't want us to know. So that's why I say it's going to be upsetting. I get it. I don't expect people to agree. I expect people to be aggravated. I hope not hostile, but I would like people to investigate it themselves.
Thank you. So, brother, did I spell your name correctly?
Ebionite Essene Nazarite Yirmiyahu.
Okay, let me put that. But I spelled Yirmiyahu correctly.
Correct. Well, let me see.
How they can find it.
Yeah, it's on Facebook. Ebionite Essene Nazarite Yirmiyahu. YEREM. Shoot, now I'm messing myself up.
I messed it all up.
Grief, because it's I want to make sure I'm getting it right. If people want to look it up, if they want to join,
they want to definitely. I recommend you, Yerem.
Thank you for that. Okay, YIRMEYAHU. Good grief. My brain must be cooked.
YIRMERAHU.
Okay, YIRMEYAHU. Oh, I see you, Sister Freedom. Okay, cool, and I appreciate that. But I wanted to say this before I go. I didn't just come upon this on my own. Okay, I came upon this by reading and studying, and somebody else disagreeing with me vehemently about the Nazarenes, the Ebionites were a sect, and Paul was over here, and I did the same things. What about this? What about the fish? What about, the road to Damascus? I'm doing the same thing. And he had every answer for me. His name is Brother Demond Alston, aka Tobiyahu. And he hammered me metaphorically. And I sat there and was like, man, all right. Because he said, I'll do a debate against you if you feel like the Nazarenes and the Ebionites weren't a sect. And I just immediately yielded. I was like, all right, bro, just lay it on me. Just go ahead and lay me out, so to speak. Just go ahead and knock me out with the juice, so to speak. And he said, no, I didn't like that. Here, let me rap with you. And we talked on the phone about it. He had sources, he had materials, he had references, and that's what convinced me. Not just feelings, not just what I believe. He supported what he believed based on historical fact. And that's where I am now. And so I've been humbled, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate Brother Sanetta. If you guys look, he brought me on a couple of times, and Sister Nepal brought me on a couple of times before to have these discussions. And there were some people that agreed. There were others that did. There was that one pastor brother that came on. If you remember, he was upset, boy.
I was a little heated too when you talk about my lamb chops. I was like,
oh man, but again, we all have the free will to accept or reject.
Right.
And that's the beauty of us as individuals. People can do what they wish. Peace and love to each and all.
Peace and love to you, brother. Thank you. And we will see you again, Most High willing. Thank you so much. I will see yourself out. I'm going to talk a little bit about the upcoming. Oh, don't forget about the upcoming debate. You might want to watch it. I'm going to advertise it right now. So thank you so much. I will see you out. I can remove you, and we will talk soon. You're very much appreciated. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you. Peace. That brother, what happened to me just now? Why did I just do that? All right. Am I still with you? Family, thank you so much for joining us. Please go follow this brother on Facebook. His information is very interesting, of course. Robin says she got her ticket. Yes, let's talk about the upcoming debate. I really appreciated that presentation. Wow, he took 3 hours of his time. Most High bless the unfathomable Most High God, almighty power, whatever you call the Most High, that I'm the one that I'm talking about of the Bible, and not even just limited to the Bible, but you get what I'm saying? The Most High, unfathomable God brings people around us who are peaceful, especially him. He's so peaceful, and he just gave us what he knows. I love how everybody put their information in the chat. And so now Napashada, did I say tomorrow? Yes, tomorrow. What are we doing tomorrow? This is what we're doing. We're doing our hymn knitter. If you subscribe to the Kemetic faith, so to speak, our brother Jabari, the teacher, historian, professor at Hunter College, Jabari Osaze, and the formidable opponent, Dr. Richard Carrier. They're going head to head tomorrow. We've been waiting for this debate for a while, but Jabari's been waiting for this debate for years. And he finally is going to go up against Dr. Carrier. Is Christianity crafted out of the Kemetic myth? Well, we'll see. We'll see who can prove their point best at 6 p.m. tomorrow, December 23rd, 2023, which is just tomorrow. $30 donation. Get your ticket. Please get your ticket. Please get your ticket, mods. I really hope that we have the hardest working mods. So I hope that you emailed Sonetter and me or Sonetter, either one of us, to make sure that you can be in the house. We appreciate you. What else? Let's see here. Yeah, that's going on. That's going on. Let me play some music. You know I love the music. Nobody does it like Sonetter, but you know I'm a little rough, but I can do it. Let's play. Let me see. Let's see what we can play. The brother was really good. I think I want to play my sister and her husband, Afu Nation. I want to play this one. Let's listen to this.
Born black, I'm a die black. Oh, Hollywood, give me my soul back. Feel like I'm living in a time trap. Searching for the hidden meaning, I'ma find that. This original team, real rap team, worldwide team, we a worldwide team. This African team, this African team. I was born black, I'm a die black. Oh, Hollywood, give me my soul back. Feel like I'm living in a time trap. Searching for the hidden meaning, I'ma find that. This original team, real rap team, worldwide team, we a worldwide team. Worldwide, this African team, yeah, this African team. To control back, so don't scratch that. Trying to get ahead, so I map that. Yeah, I'm tapping in, it's a Scott that. And we ain't no kin unless you African. I'm so loyal to the victor, go to sports. You running out of time, melanin rules the world. Trying to get what's mine, so you know I'm such a pearl. Staying on my grind, affirmation in your world. Shimmer when I shine, lead in the line. Yeah, I know I'm fine, God bless from behind. Sun kissed in the morning course, hanging down my spine. Linked to the source, so I'm rooted to the vines. Indie but major, we hot like potatoes. Freeing the slaves, they cannot contain us. African power, they never can shame us. Taking what's ours, who cares if they blame us? I was born black, I'ma die black. I'm on Hollywood, give me my soul back. Feel like I'm living in a time trap. Searching for the hidden meaning, I'ma find that. This original team, real rap team, worldwide team, we a worldwide team. Worldwide, this African bruh, this African team. Black burner, call me Nat Turner. I've been on the run, so please don't push me me to murder. I might take it one step further, cause I'm a cosmic observer. Since I've been young, been an earner, so toxic I just might burn you with it. Afro Nation getting deeper than your average teacher. They beat you with false information, this country eat you. Jack Reacher, never been a preacher, put you in the game. I can take you out the bleacher, ain't no need of being shy. If you a real black speaker from MMA back to the side, in LA we gon' need ya. Boots up, it's time to troop up. Born black, I'ma die black, that's the truth. Yup, we want seats at political tables. You can keep your Grammys, just stop telling fables. Cause we young black owners of our own labels. Self-publishers, writers, producers, we won't pay you. I was born black, I'ma die black. Come on Hollywood, give me my soul back. Feel like I'm living in a time trap. Searching for the hidden meaning, I'ma find it. This original team, real rap team, worldwide team, real worldwide team. This African team, this African team. I was born black, I'ma die black. Come on Hollywood, give me my soul back. Feel like I'm living in a time trap. Searching for the hidden meaning, I'ma find it. This original team, real rap team, worldwide team, real worldwide team. This African team, this African team.